Chapter 1034. Changsheng, you old monk. Garuda's heart ached when he saw the black smoke diminish. Before he could curse, the prayer beads circled around the black smoke nest and slowly fell into the elder's hands. Sigh, how did it end so quickly? Garuda's clear voice was filled with regret. The black smoke nest quickly flew out of Huayu Palace. Disciples of the Shindao sect, please come to Huayu Palace for a chat. Nun Jing raised her voice. Yes, Nun Jing, please. As soon as he finished speaking, a beautiful middle-aged woman with a beautiful figure flew in from the sky. She was also using the levitation technique. Then, like a gust of black wind, a thin and small man dressed in strange clothes descended from the sky and floated in the air. This man was the Tenryu sect's Garuda, Heavenly King. Garuda, Heavenly King, had a pointy mouth and monkey cheeks. His long eyebrows were slanted into his sideburns. He landed on the square and turned to ask the middle-aged woman, "Who are you? Since when did the Shindao sect have its own inheritance?" The middle-aged woman cupped her hands and bowed. "Let me tell you, Garuda, Heavenly King, I am a descendant of the Shindao sect. My name is Yanxio, but the Shindao sect was removed from the Jianghu thousands of years ago. I have no intention of calling myself the Shindao sect anymore. Now, my sect is called Between the Clouds and the Water, which means that I follow the clouds above the water." Between the clouds and the water? Garuda's small eyes turned. Why is it so troublesome? Shindao sect sounds better. Yanxio smiled. I am now the sect leader of Between the Clouds and the Water. I came here to meet my brothers in the Jianghu and inform them that Between the Clouds and the Water will be famous in the Jianghu from now on. Nun Jing sneered. If the Shindao sect is related to the incense cult, then I am naturally willing to support them. But what is the origin of Between the Clouds and the Water? How can you take advantage of my sect's return to the Jianghu? Nun Jing, do you think I am willing to do that? My sect has already made preparations to hold the martial arts assembly today and announce our return to the Jianghu to the world. Who would have thought that the incense cult would also announce our return to the Jianghu to the world? Since the incense cult is holding the assembly, there is naturally no need for us to hold the assembly of Between the Clouds and the Water. Let's not talk about the fact that the heroes of the Jianghu have just finished participating in the Assembly of Heroes. So there are no more heroes who would care about the Assembly of Heroes Between the Clouds and the Water. In terms of reputation, Between the Clouds and the Water can't compare to the incense cult. Why don't we use the incense cult's glory and enter the Jianghu hand in hand with the incense cult? When she heard Yanxio lowering his status, Nun Jing looked at Garuda, who was standing next to her, and then at the elder. She could not help but ponder. At this time, many people had also rushed out of Huayu Palace. The current leader of the Righteous Tao Alliance, Zhang San, was watching this unbelievable battle from afar. His face was as dark as water. It was unknown whether he was jealous or had other plans. All right, Bai Zhangmin is right. Since it is a martial arts assembly, then it is naturally a martial arts assembly for the entire Jianghu. Not only can the incense cult announce this to the entire Jianghu, even if the Shindao sect reappears, we should also be able to Nun Jing there's a difference in your words. It is Between the Clouds and the Water, not the Shindao sect. Yanxio said with a smile. Nun Jing laughed and said, whether it is the Shindao sect or Between the Clouds and the Water, they are both sects that have inherited the way of the immortals. How can the incense cult not lend a hand? In that case, thank you, Nun Jing Yanxio smiled and bowed. If that is the case, Bai Zhangmin, why don't you call your disciples out? Please excuse me, Nun Jing Yanxio did not mind. He waved his hand and made a strange gesture. Immediately, dozens of disciples of Between the Clouds and the Water wielding long sabers appeared around Huayu Palace. They quickly used their qinggong to arrive beside Yanxio. The expressions of the people in Huayu Palace changed. Their eyes were filled with anger. The disciples of the incense cult were especially angry. Nun Jing I did not mean to do this. It was just a way to protect myself. It is fine, it is fine. This method is very normal. Nanjing, Yi said nonchalantly. Even if it is the incense cult, we still have a backup plan. As she spoke, she reached into her bosom and took out an apricot yellow flag. She poured her true chi into it and waved it slightly. A few faint clouds floated out of the flag and quickly flew out of Huayu Palace. As they flew, the edges of the clouds became thinner and thinner. By the time they were out of Huayu Palace, they had almost disappeared. Abbess Jing Yi waved the small flag again. Boom! Outside the Huayu Palace, a 30-feet-tall wall of fire immediately rose. The flame was more than a foot long and emitted a greenish-yellow color. This? Biancio was dumbfounded. Garuda looked at the wall of fire with a dignified expression. All right, this is just a precaution from the incense cult. It seems that it will not be necessary. Nanjing smiled and waved the flag again. The wall of fire immediately disappeared. Inside the Huayu Palace, everyone's reactions were different. The heads of the famous sects all looked pensive, as if they were considering something. The other sects all looked enlightened, and then their faces were full of excitement. They were even more excited than when they watched the fight of the immortal Tao. Many people had already begun to secretly look at their feet, or use their hands to touch the small tables and stools, try to find traces of the immortal Tao magic arts. Of course, there were also many people who looked frightened. They were sects that were not very close to the incense cult. They wanted to use this martial arts circle convention to find out what was going on. But looking at the incense cult, if they wanted to, all they had to do was wave their flag, and everyone in Huayu Palace would be buried. Their original plan of using their qin gong to escape as soon as they realized that something was wrong was completely useless. Therefore, everyone understood why the incense cult had held the martial arts circle convention on Huayu Peak. Bai Yinxiu had been operating on the water island of the Water Cloud sect for decades. She had confidence in her Dharma power and magic, and was confident that she had the capital to confront the fragrant cult. That was why she had mobilized so many people to show off at the Fragrant Cult's Martial Arts Society assembly. Who would have thought that, not to mention magic, she had only dabbled in it, and it was not the time to shed all pretense of cordiality. She had brought a group of disciples to the Huayu Peak secretly to show off. Who would have thought that she had still fallen into Nanjing Yi's trap, a big sect with an immortal Tao legacy? It was not a joke. Bai Yinxiu's expression changed slightly as thousands of thoughts swirled in her mind. After a moment, she came up with a plan. She bowed and said, as expected of the illustrious, fragrant religion, this concubine was truly lacking in manners and was like a frog at the bottom of a well. I apologize now. Please forgive me, Abbess Jing Yi. Nanjing Yi waved her hand and smiled. After the immortal Tao legacy, your Shindao sect. Haha. Nanjing, the Shindao sect is history. Our sect is now between the clouds and the water. Oh, I am confused. I'm used to calling you that. Bai Zhongmin, please forgive me. Your sect between the clouds and the water has been reborn and has entered the Jianghu. You and the incense cult announced at the same time. This is a grand event in the Jianghu. It is the best of both worlds. How can I not applaud and welcome you? Come. Garuda King, Bai Zhongmin, please take a seat in Huayu Palace. I was just about to nag you. Garuda laughed and flew into Huayu Palace like a wisp of smoke. Please. Bai Yinxiu was polite and followed the elder into Huayu Palace. However, in the previous Huayu Palace, there was an oval platform at the head of the table. There was a chair on the platform, which was where Nanjing Yi sat. Elder Changsheng and Alliance leader Zhang San sat in the VIP seats below the platform. Garuda entered the Huayu Palace. Without even looking, he flew straight to the platform and sat down. Nanjing Yi's expression changed slightly. Just as she was about to speak, Garuda laughed and said, Jing, the seats in Huayu Palace don't seem to be like this. Nanjing Yi's eyes narrowed. She said coldly, I thought the Tenryu sect might look down on the incense cult and wouldn't send people here. The Shindao sect and Misty School have been removed from the Jianghu. Wouldn't the 5 seats on this platform be a waste? If I invited the Elder and Alliance Master Zhang San, who else would come? I might as well hide these 4 seats. Ha, Garuda said again. Now that the Tenryu sect is here, this, between the clouds and the water, is here too. Jing Yi, you don't have to hide anymore. You won't have the chance to sit on the platform alone. After a moment of silence, Jing Yi looked at the confused Zhang San and Bai Yinxiu and said with a smile, Heavenly King Garuda is right. Please wait a moment. As she spoke, she made a hand sign and hit the platform. A faint yellow light flashed. Chapter 1035. The great sects of the immortal Tao were the originators of martial arts in the world. The 5 sects had been arranged 10,000 years ago, but the vicissitudes of the world had changed. The branches of the other 5 sects had their own lives and deaths, so they were no longer close to the 5 sections. The 5 sects had changed a lot. The incense cult had not entered the Jianghu for a long time. The Shindao sect had been destroyed long ago and was replaced by the sect between the clouds and the water. The Misty School had been destroyed and was replaced by the Righteous Alliance. Now that the 5 sects had taken their seats in Huayu Palace, there was a new order in the Jianghu. Nanjing Yi was the last to ascend the high platform. She walked to the jade seat in the center and sat down. Just as she sat down, there was a flash of multicolored light on the high platform and the faint sound of bamboo instruments. Although it was faint, it had already spread throughout the Huayu Palace. In the Huayu Palace, there were more than 200 sects and thousands of people. Envy flashed in their eyes as they wondered when their own sects would be able to ascend the high platform of the immortal Tao. All right, everyone, please have some tea and rest for a moment. The Wulin Convention will continue with its brilliance. Nanjing Yi cupped her hands slightly, her voice spreading throughout the Huayu Palace. Immediately, the inner sect disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak held trays in their hands. On the trays were tea and fruits made by Lingering Fragrance Cult. They were delivered to the tables of the various sections. Everyone in the Jianghu had an unruly side. When they saw beautiful women, even the inner sect disciples of the incense cult couldn't help but look lustful. However, when they saw the women's martial arts cultivation, they couldn't help but be flabbergasted. Perhaps on the surface, one couldn't see a person's true martial arts with the naked eye, but which of these sect leaders and elders hadn't been immersed in martial arts for decades? How could they not be able to see the characteristics of powerful martial arts from a few details? How could they still look at these young women with martial arts that weren't inferior to their own? Well, maybe they had some special hobbies, but let's not talk about them. Thus, almost all of the elders couldn't help but look like profound elders because of their status. The young disciples were different. When they saw such beautiful women, how could they maintain their composure? They all had smiles plastered on their faces as they stood up one by one and greeted them politely. Their teachers wanted to stop them, but they changed their minds and didn't say anything. These young disciples of the various sects were all young talents that had been selected by their respective sections. They had come here not only to broaden their horizons, but also to show off their skills in front of the heroes of the world. Their mission was to gain face for their respective sections. When the masters of the various sects saw that the inner disciples of the School of Incense were so outstanding, they must have made some calculations in their hearts. If their disciples were to gain the favor of a female disciple and establish a relationship with the School of Incense, then, not to mention the status of their sects in Jianghu, perhaps they would even have the opportunity to sit on those jade chairs on the high platform. In the end, even some of the bashful young disciples were secretly kicked by their own teachers under the table, causing their faces to turn red. But this was just wishful thinking. The female disciples of the incense cult might not be as outstanding as the disciples of Emo Ning Gong, but they could not possibly set their sights on the martial world. Cough, cough, of course, unless they were like Zhang Xiaohua, who was so infatuated that she could fight her way up to Lingering Fragrance Peak. Only then would they consider it. The inside and outside of Huayu Palace was a lively scene, and the high platform was another scene. Abbess Jing waved her hand and cast a spell. Immediately, A layer of milky white restrictive spells appeared around the platform, surrounding it tightly. Bai Yanxiu and Zhang San's expressions changed slightly. They didn't understand what was going on, but when they saw that the Grand Elder and Garuda didn't say anything, they looked at each other and didn't say anything. All right, it's rare for the School of Incense to entertain guests. I hope that everyone will not mind. As she spoke, a few female disciples passed through the milky white restriction. Each of them held a tray in their hands. The one in front had 5 small wine cups on it. Nun Jingyi smiled and said, "This is the chilled ice wine brewed from the chilled ice grass of the School of Incense. We use the recipe of the School of Immortals, and it has great benefits for refining one's vital energy. Please enjoy." As she spoke, Nun Jing eat down the wine cup in her hand. Then, she closed her eyes and adjusted her breathing, as if she was refining the vital energy in the wine. Garuda saw this and laughed. "I didn't expect the School of Incense to be so generous. You even took out such a precious item to entertain your guests. If I didn't come today, I would have suffered a great loss." As she spoke, she tilted her head back and down the wine. "Amit Ba," the elder chanted. "Wine is not wine. Meat is not meat. Wine and meat pass through the intestines, but Buddha remains in the heart." She also downed the wine in one gulp. Bai Yanxiu looked at the dark green wine in the small wine cup in his hand and couldn't help but hesitate. The wine cup was carved from white jade and should have been warm, but when he held it in his hand, it felt a little cold. However, this coldness was different from usual. It was mixed with the warmth, and there were traces of icy ripples. As he raised the wine cup, a faint fragrance drifted into his nose. The wine swirled left and right with the movement of his hand. Every time it swirled, a faint fragrance would spread out. Bai Yanxiu released his divine sense, and his expression changed slightly. He saw that the small wine cup was overflowing with vital energy. It was many times more vital energy than the immortal tea between the clouds and the water, and this vital energy was faintly dispersed along with the fragrance. Bai Yanxiu didn't dare to be negligent. He tilted his head back and poured the wine into his mouth. Immediately, a refreshing feeling spread out from his mouth, and then a small stream rose from his stomach. This was the essence of the vital energy of heaven and earth. Bai Yanxiu's face turned slightly red, and he immediately used the Shindao Sex heart technique to refine this vital energy of heaven and earth into his meridians. At this time, Zhang San was different. He saw that the other 4 people treasured this strange-looking wine, and also closed their eyes to adjust their breathing. How could he not know that this was an item of the immortal path? However, when he smelled the wine cup in his hand, it didn't have the smell of ordinary wine at all. There was only a refreshing fragrance that made him feel refreshed, and it had nothing to do with the wine. He hesitated for a moment, but just as he was about to use it, Nun Jing opened her eyes and said with a smile, "A lion's head, Zhang. This wine was brewed using the Immortal Paths method. If you don't know the Immortal Paths heart technique, you won't be able to refine the essence of the wine. This wine is just an ordinary drink. It won't increase one's inner strength by much and could be said to be a waste. I think if there are people in the Righteous Alliance who know the Immortal Path cultivation method, why don't Alliance head Zhang bring it back?" Zhang San's eyes narrowed, and his face turned slightly green. However, he quickly recovered and nodded. "Nun Jing is right. Good, bring me a jade bottle." "Yes." A voice answered from outside the restriction. A female disciple dressed in light red clothes came in from outside, holding a small jade bottle in her hand. "Eh?" The female disciple had just entered when she saw Garuda, who was sitting on the jade chair and had just opened his eyes. She couldn't help but cry out in surprise. The female disciple was also stunned. She looked at Garuda in confusion. With a whoosh, Garuda suddenly jumped up from the jade chair. He seemed to have forgotten to use his qigong. He walked in a few steps to the female disciple and grabbed her wrist. The female disciple was stunned. She tried to use her qigong to dodge, but how could she be a match for Garuda? Before she could move, she was caught. With a cry of surprise, the jade bottle fell to the ground. Nun Jing was stunned. With a wave of her hand, The jade bottle flew into her hand. She said unhappily, "Garuda, what is the meaning of this?" However, Garuda completely ignored her. He held the female disciple's wrist with one hand and pressed her acupoints with the other. He began to open his eyes wide and carefully examine her from head to toe. Nanjing coldly snorted and handed the jade bottle to Zhang San, saying, "Alliance leader Zhang, put this icy soul wine into the jade bottle. If it is left in the wine cup for too long, the essence inside will disappear." Zhang San took the wine cup and poured it into the jade bottle as instructed. He put it away and said no more. He coldly looked at Garuda, who was not far away. Garuda seemed to have obtained some kind of treasure. He looked at the female disciple from head to toe. He was just short of taking off her clothes to examine her. The female disciple's face was red with embarrassment, but her eyes were filled with fear. Her body trembled uncontrollably. Although she couldn't move, she still looked at Nanjing for help. "Enough, Garuda. Let go of your hand." Nanjing said angrily. Nanjing, wait a moment." As he spoke, Garuda stretched out his right hand and pointed between the female disciple's eyebrows. "Umph." Nanjing coldly snorted. Her hand moved slightly, and a gust of wind from her finger attacked Garuda's main acupoint on his back. Garuda chuckled and dodged the attack. Sigh. Nanjing rose into the air like a wisp of smoke. She stretched out her hand and grabbed the back of Garuda's neck. Garuda didn't turn around. His body flashed, and an afterimage flashed. In the blink of an eye, he floated to another part of the platform, still holding the female disciple in his hand. When Nanjing Yi's figure turned in the air and wanted to continue the chase, Garuda's finger had already landed between the female disciple's eyebrows. "Ha ha!" Garuda let out a surprised laugh. He landed on the ground, let go of the female disciple's hand, and jumped onto the jade chair. However, the female disciple's acupoint hadn't been unsealed. She could only stand there in a daze. "Garuda, what is the meaning of this?" Nanjing walked to the female disciple's side and looked her up and down. She also used her divine sense to check her. She didn't find anything unusual. Nothing. Nanjing please don't blame me." Garuda seemed to be in an extremely good mood. His lean face was filled with a smile as he said, "This one has a presumptuous request. I need Nanjing Yi's approval." Nanjing looked at the frightened female disciple and shook her head. "If you don't explain the matter clearly, this sect won't agree to anything." It's actually nothing much." Garuda looked at the female disciple behind Nanjing and smiled. "This girl has a body of true fire. Her meridians contain fire-type true essence. This heavenly king urgently needs to break through a bottleneck. This one has no choice but to be thick-skinned and ask for this girl from Nanjing to be a cauldron for dual cultivation." Chapter 1036. Cauldron. Zhangsen wasn't the only one surprised. Jing and the other immortal cultivators were also surprised. Jing looked at the female disciple beside her, her eyes full of curiosity. She turned around and said, "Garuda, the cauldron is a legend of the immortal path. Could it be that your demon sex cultivators also need this? Moreover, cauldrons are usually only found among immortal cultivators. Right now, most of the immortal cultivators are in front of you. Although this female disciple has some potential, but, to his surprise, Garuda waved his hand and laughed. In the eyes of immortal cultivators like you, of course, this female disciple's aptitude is extremely ordinary. There's nothing special about her. But in the eyes of the demonic sect, oh, this woman's constitution is special. Perhaps it's only useful to my cultivation." He then explained, "In ancient times, immortal cultivators were limited by gender. They cultivated yang, spiritual energy. As the ancient saying goes, solitary yang doesn't grow, solitary yin doesn't grow. Only by balancing yin and yang can one achieve the Tao. Thus, Sun Mi used a lowly woman's body as a cauldron. Using yin and yang intercourse, They guided the woman's spiritual energy into her meridians. Of course, this woman had to have immortal cultivation. But my demon sect doesn't need to do that. As long as we can find a woman with the physique, we can use a secret technique to directly absorb the essence into our bodies. Of course, immortal cultivation emphasizes simplicity and harmony. No matter if it's the caster or the cauldron, both will benefit. But how much the cauldron benefits depends on the caster's intentions. He glanced at the frightened female disciple and continued, "But my demon sect is different. This cauldron can only provide essence to the caster, but not any actual benefits. AI, the world's spiritual energy has greatly decreased. It's rare to find someone with such meridians. This girl's meridians are even rarer. They won't be of much use to others, but they'll be of great use to my Imperial Wind technique." Afterwards, he cupped his hands towards Nanjing Yi and said, "I've said so much just to ask Nanjing to give me this ordinary disciple of the School of Fragrance. Although this woman has lost all her powers after becoming this heavenly king's cauldron, she is no different from an ordinary woman. Furthermore, this heavenly king guarantees that she will live out her life in glory." Seeing that Jing Shirtai didn't say anything, Garuda said, "If Shirtai agrees, I will remember this favor. When the aroma cult needs me, I will do my best to help. Oh, I have a jade slip here that I just obtained. I haven't looked at it carefully yet. If Abbas doesn't mind, why don't you take a look at it first?" As he spoke, Garuda took out a jade slip from his bosom. With a wave of his hand, the jade slip slowly flew to Nanjing Yi. Nanjing Yi took it and scanned it with her divine sense. She couldn't help but be startled. However, she immediately threw it back and said with a smile, "What if I don't agree?" "You don't agree?" Garuda looked around and sneered. "This heavenly king is giving face to your fragrant cult by asking for it in person. Although this heavenly king can't do anything to your fragrant cult. To be honest, if this heavenly king wanted to kidnap this woman while your sect protecting formation is open, it would be as easy as flipping my hand. Furthermore, there are so many female disciples in the fragrant cult. Perhaps there are many that suit this heavenly king's taste." Ha ha ha. Garuda was quite unscrupulous, but Jing Shirtai knew that what he said was absolutely reasonable. From the sparring session just now, Jing Shirtai already knew that Garuda's cultivation was inferior to hers. However, Garuda specialized in lightness techniques. His levitation technique was far from hers. It seemed that he had already mastered it and was on the verge of breaking through the Imperial Wind technique. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so thick-skinned as to ask her for a disciple. With the Imperial Wind technique, Garuda could come and go as he pleased in the fragrant cult. This female disciple in front of her looked somewhat familiar. She definitely wasn't a disciple of Imo Nongong. She couldn't keep her by her side at all times. If Garuda had any ill intentions, he could kidnap her at any time. Rather than offending Garuda, why not do him a favor at no cost? Many thoughts ran through Jing Shirtai's mind. She then smiled and said, "We'll talk about this after the martial arts convention. Garuda, please unseal my female disciple's acupoints." Garuda frowned slightly. He looked at the people on the platform, and then looked at the people below the platform who were blocked by the restriction and could not see what was happening on the platform. He smiled and said, well said, well said. I will wait for Abbas's choice." As he spoke, he waved his hand. A few wisps of smoke, almost invisible to the naked eye, flew out and hit the female disciple's major acupoints. With a cry, the female disciple was able to move. Her first reaction was to wrap her arms around her chest and curl into a ball. She cried out, "Sect leader, save me! Sect leader, save me! Don't panic. Everything will be decided by this sect. Come here." "Yes, sect leader." The girl trembled as she walked to Jing Shirtai's side. However, her gaze was still timid as she looked at Garuda, who was smiling brightly. "What's your name? Which hall on Lingering Fragrance Peak are you in?" Jing Shirtai asked kindly. "Disciple's name is Zhang Pinger. I'm in Lihua Hall on Lingering Fragrance Peak." The female disciple trembled as she answered. "Zhang Pinger?" Jing Yishirtai frowned slightly. She had a faint impression of this name. That's right, this was the person that great Elder Jing Gang's youngest disciple, Yu Zhuochuan, was thinking about. It was also because of her that great Elder Jing Gang took his anger out on Zhang Xiaohua. In order to hunt down Zhang Xiaohua, he went to Lingering Fragrance Peak and was killed by either the Tenryu sect or an immortal expert from between the clouds and the water. Femme fatale. For some reason, this phrase flashed through Jing Yishirtai's mind when she saw Zhang Pinger's lovely and pitiful appearance. This sect leader remembers that you're the disciple of Li Huahal's Weisholm Master Inin. How come we're here? Jing Yishirtai was somewhat puzzled. Sect leader, today, there are many guests on Huayu Peak. Yesterday, we received sect leader's decree and sent some disciples from various halls to Huayu Peak. Disciples master and old acquaintances came to receive them. Disciple was curious, so I followed. Zhang Pinger's mood gradually stabilized, and her voice no longer trembled. Alas, this sect leader understands. Jing Yishirtai sighed. You can leave now. This sect leader will tell your master about this matter later. Sect leader, sect leader. Zhang Pinger's face immediately turned pale. She stretched out her hand and pulled Jing Yishirtai's sleeve. Disciple doesn't want to go. Even if I die, I don't want to go. Jing Yishirtai looked at Zhang Pinger's hand and frowned slightly. She paused for a moment and said warmly, this sect leader didn't say that you should go. Don't worry, you can leave first. Yes. Sect leader. Zhang Pinger's eyes were slightly teary and her face was increasingly pale. She bit her lips and didn't say anything in the end. She got up and hurried to the restriction outside the high platform. However, before she could reach it, her legs went soft and she almost fell. When she got up again, the tears in her eyes had been replaced by determination. After Zhang Pinger left, Jing Yishirtai glanced at Garuda and then at the sect leader who was looking down at the ground. She smiled and said, all right, everyone has already tasted the icy soul wine. Next, there's our humble sect's new radish tea, heavenly ice dates, and green leaf fruit. They're all great for cultivation. As she spoke, the other female disciples offered their trays. However, at this time, everyone was far away from Garuda, afraid that he would see through them again. Garuda still had the same expression as before. He didn't seem to be worried that Jing Yi wouldn't be moved. He only smiled and accepted the tea and spirit fruits. As for the other female disciples, he didn't care at all. If he could find someone with strange meridians, Zhang Pinger wouldn't be so precious anymore. Would he, Garuda, still need to run to the incense sect and lower himself? After the four people finished eating, each of them put away their food. Jing Yi made a hand seal, and the restriction on the high platform gradually disappeared. The crowd below the platform, which had been clamoring nonstop, immediately fell silent. All right, everyone, the food and wine are over. Next is the sword competition that everyone has been waiting for. In fact, when the 5 sects of the immortal Tao gathered here in the past, it was mostly to drink and discuss the sword. This time, there are just more sects and more heroes. There's no difference. Of course, since there are more people, the rules need to be changed slightly. I won't say more about the specific arrangements. When the sword competition begins, I'll explain it to non-Shuezhen. What I'm talking about here won't change during the sword competition. That is the reward. Whoosh! Everyone's emotions were stirred. The people inside Huayu Palace all craned their necks, wanting to see what Nun Jing you would take out as a reward. The people in the square outside the palace all pricked up their ears, wanting to hear what Nun Jing Yi would say. Nun Jing Yi was very satisfied with the effect in front of her eyes. She waved her hand, and a beautiful female disciple held a jade tray with a thin book on it. She lightly floated to the front of the high platform. Nun Jing Yi pointed with her finger and smiled. This is the result of the sword competition. It's the rarely seen Jianghu's top internal cultivation method, the breaking blade force. Whoosh! Another sound rang out. This time, it was even louder than the previous one. Everyone below the high platform began to talk at once. At this time, a voice rang out from the side. Nunjing E, this is your fault. This breaking blade force is the secret cultivation method of our Shindao sect. How would you take it out as a reward? The one who spoke was Bai Yinxiu. At this time, Bai Yinxiu's face was slightly red and his eyes flashed with incomparable anger. Bai Zhongmin, don't be mistaken. This breaking blade force is incomparably precious. As long as you practice the 9 layers of this cultivation method to the peak, you'll be able to step onto the path of immortality. It's definitely one of the few internal cultivation methods in Jianghu. However, it's only the secret cultivation method of the Shindao sect. This doesn't seem to have anything to do with between the clouds and the water. Didn't Bai Zhongmin remind me just now that you're between the clouds and the water and not the Shindao sect? Nunjing, he explained with a smile. But Bai Yinxiu was speechless. This breaking blade force was the secret cultivation method of the Shindao sect. After the Shindao sect was destroyed, it disappeared. Today, there is only a fragment of the between the clouds and the water. If this breaking blade force was obtained by other sects in Jianghu, perhaps the 6th sect of the path of immortality would be born. Thank you. If you like this work, you're welcome to cast a recommendation vote or a monthly vote at Chidian. Come. Chapter 1037. Bai Yinxiu's eyes burned with anger when she saw the breaking blade force in the hands of the Aroma sect disciple, but she had no excuse. She had repeatedly corrected Nunjing, differentiating the Shindao sect from the between the clouds and the water. She didn't expect that she would overreach herself and lose the best chance to ask for her sect's secret manual. Looking at Bai Yinxiu's dejected and angry appearance, Jingyi Nun ignored her and said to the crowd, "This cultivation method is most suitable for men to practice. The hero who gets 3rd place in this sword competition will be able to take away the blade breaking force. Hee, of course. How to practice it is none of my business." After that, Nunjing waved her hand, and another female disciple stepped forward. This time, the item on the tray was covered by a silk scarf so no one could see it. However, there were still some people present who had expressions of astonishment on their faces. Bai Yinxiu was naturally one of them. When the female disciple came to the side of the platform, Nunjing waved her hand and lifted the scarf, revealing 5 fist-sized stones. The stones were of different colors: yellow, cyan, blue, red, and brown. What are these? Most of the people in Huayu Palace were stunned. Since the 3rd place in the sword competition could get the breaking blade force, the 2nd place in the sword competition would get it. It should be more precious than the breaking blade force. But these 5 stones looked very ordinary. What was so precious about them? However, some of the monks of the Dalan Temple, some of the disciples of Between the Clouds and the Water, and some of the disciples of the Aroma sects, Immo, Xiangong, stared at the 5 stones with burning passion in their eyes. They were like mice that saw rice. Nunjing looked at Bai Yinxiu, Master Changsheng, and Zhang San, who was also tempted. She smiled and said, "Everyone, you must know that the breaking blade force is a key to entering the Tao through martial arts. But how do you practice it after entering the Tao? The Tao of immortality is different from the Tao of martial arts. Internal energy can be generated on its own. The Tao of immortality's internal energy is called vital energy. Although some can be generated in the meridians, the normal method is to absorb it from the outside. The absorbed energy is called the Qi of heaven and earth. In ancient times, the world was full of heaven and earth. People of the Tao of immortality could directly absorb the Qi of heaven and earth and refine it in their meridians, turning it into vital energy. Everyone knows the power of internal energy, but let me tell you, vital energy power is 100 times stronger than internal energy. Perhaps it's not appropriate to put it this way. If internal energy is like a baby, then true energy is like an adult. Not only is there a difference in strength, there is also a difference in ability. Moreover, vital energy is the foundation of all cultivators of the Tao of immortality. All magic and divine abilities are based on the control of vital energy. Now, the Tao of heaven and earth has changed greatly. The Tao of immortality has been annihilated. People of the Tao of immortality can't directly absorb vital energy from heaven and earth. So how do they practice? They absorb vital energy from these stones. These stones are called vital stones in the Tao of immortality. The vital energy of heaven and earth contained in these vital stones is purer than that of heaven and earth and easier to refine. That is to say, with the breaking blade force just now, you can take one step into the Tao of immortality. With these 5 vital stones, you can completely enter the Tao of immortality. Boom! The crowd exploded like a pot of boiling water and began to discuss. Perhaps there were people from the famous sects in Huayu Palace who knew about the Tao of immortality, but they had never seen 5 vital stones in perfect condition. Needless to say, the sects in the square were even more so. What Nanjing Yi said just now was basically to let them know what the Tao of immortality was and how to practice it. This was actually to cater to their curiosity of coming to the Tao of immortality. With the help of Huayu Palace's formation, Nanjing Yi's divine sense saw the curious expressions of the people outside the square. She couldn't help but smile. The Tao of immortality hadn't appeared in Jianghu for a long time, so the sect's fear of the Tao of immortality had greatly decreased. This time, she took out the Tao of immortality to broaden their horizons and let them know the power of the Tao of immortality. After waiting for a while, her voice grew softer and softer. Nanjing, he said, the things in this world are not metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. The same goes for vital stones. Yellow vital stones are metal, green vital stones are wood, blue vital stones are water, red vital stones are fire, and brown vital stones are earth. The breaking blade force is a metal attribute technique. Although absorbing the other 4 types of vital stones can increase one's cultivation, if you use the yellow metal vital stone, you'll get twice the result with half the effort. In addition, it's not that I'm boasting, but the vital energy of heaven and earth is scarce, so the vital stones in this world are gradually being worn away. In the 10,000 years since the Tao of immortality was destroyed, vital stones have become rare. These 5 vital stones with all 5 elements are the only things I have. I only took them out for this martial arts convention to share with you. Good. The leader of an unknown sect stood up and clapped his hands. The fragrant cult is indeed a great sect of the Tao of immortality. It lives up to its reputation. This kind of style is rare in the world. My Flat Mountain faction is truly impressed. If the fragrant cult needs anything in the future, our humble sect will not refuse. That's right. The fragrant cult is indeed generous. They share the secrets of the Tao of immortality with us. We also admire them. For a moment, there was endless praise for the fragrant cult. Of the other 4 people on the stage, Garuda was sitting on a chair. He looked sideways and did not look forward. He was only looking left and right. No one knew if he was looking for Zhang Pinger. The elder still put his palms together and lowered his head without saying a word. Zhang San's face was as calm as still water. He looked coldly at the clamor below. Bai Yinxiu was biting his lips. His eyes narrowed. No one knew what he was thinking. Well, this is the reward for the 2nd place in the Sword Conference tournament. The cult has finished. Everyone, let's see the reward for the champion. This sentence piqued everyone's curiosity. Even Bai Yinxiu and the others looked sideways. They all wanted to know what other good things the fragrant cult could take out on top of the 5 elements primordial stone. The 3rd item was placed in a jade box. Bai Yinxiu and the others' divine senses were blocked by the jade box's restriction. They could not see what was inside. At this time, Nanjing Yi said, I just said that the cultivation of the Tao of immortality relies on the qi of heaven and earth and the primordial stone. But once you have the cultivation, what do you rely on to fight? In martial arts, you can transfer your inner strength to your hands and feet. You can also use your strength to use weapons like sabers, spears, swords, halberds, and so on. Similarly, you could transfer your inner strength to weapons like sabers and swords. In the Tao of immortality, your qi can be used to form spells. You can also use your qi to activate weapons like sabers, spears, swords, and halberds. It's a bit troublesome to explain these weapons. You can think of them as weapons. By the way, when Bai Zhongman between the clouds and the water was sparring with me, the elders and the Garuda King in the air, the weapon used was a magic weapon. When the crowd heard this, how could they not know that there was a magic weapon inside the jade box? When they thought that if they won first place in the sword competition, they would be rewarded with a magic weapon that could be used to fly around in the air. Everyone couldn't help but blush and their blood boiled. Of course, the participants of the sword competition this time are all the younger generation in the world of martial artists. If we bring out our famous enchanted vessel, we will be showing our sincerity, but the disciples might not be able to use it, and it will taint our sincerity. So, after careful consideration, we have decided to bring out a replica of the purple phoenix hairpin personally created by a senior from the Path of Immortals as the prize for the champion of the sword competition. Everyone present knew about the purple phoenix hairpin. When they heard Nun Jingyi mention it, they were all surprised. However, when they heard that it was a replica, they showed a look of realization. The others were also disappointed when they heard that it was a replica. When Nun Jingyi saw this, she smiled and said, "Everyone, don't underestimate this replica. Its power isn't bad, but it requires a lot less qi. It's suitable for disciples who have just entered the Tao of immortality." As she spoke, she waved her hand, and the jade box flew into her hand. She cast several spells and unlocked the restriction on the jade box. Nun Jingyi opened the jade box, revealing a purple phoenix hairpin carved with exquisite patterns. It was exactly the same as the purple phoenix hairpin in Zhang Xiaohua's arms. Nun Jingyi held the replica purple phoenix hairpin in her hand and raised her head to look at it. She casually waved her hand, and a weak bolt of lightning suddenly appeared out of thin air, following the direction of the purple phoenix hairpin. After a crackling sound, there was a bang sound. Not far from Nun Jingyi, a jade chair was first entangled by the lightning and then exploded into several pieces. The person sitting on the chair had already stood up because he was greedy for the magic weapon in the jade box, but now he was greatly shocked. The whole place was in an uproar. The lightning was incomparably fast. When everyone saw it clearly, it had already hit the chair. If it had been aimed at a person, there would have been no time to dodge. Moreover, the distance was so far. After being hit, the power was not small. It was simply incomparable to the hidden weapons commonly seen in the Jianghu. It really is an immortal weapon. It's extraordinary. This was a unanimous thought in everyone's mind. However, Nun Jingyi did not stop. She waved the replica purple phoenix hairpin in her hand a few more times, and a small net of electric arcs appeared in the air with crackling sounds. The people under the net were so frightened that they could only shrink their necks and retreat one after another, afraid that the net would fall and hit them. However, Nun Jingyi smiled. The replica purple phoenix hairpin in her hand swayed slightly. The net of electric arcs seemed to be pulled by ropes and floated around in the air. As the people moved, it also moved and covered their heads. After a while, when she saw that the people's foreheads were covered in sweat, Nun Jingyi no longer teased them. With a wave of her hand, the net of electric arcs fell directly to the empty jade chair that someone had been sitting on just now. This time, the movement was even greater. After a crackling sound, the jade chair exploded. This time, the explosion was smaller than before, and there were even more fragments. What do you think, everyone? Although this replica purple phoenix hairpin is not as powerful as the real one, it's still an elementary, immortal weapon. It's perfect for new disciples to use. It's also the best weapon to be awarded to the champion of the sword conference. If you like this work, you are welcome to come at Chidian. Come to cast a recommendation vote or a monthly vote. Chapter 1038. Jingyi's words were to the point. Although the real purple phoenix hairpin was powerful, it required a huge amount of qi. It was impossible to use it unless one was at the middle stage of the qi refining stage. When Zhang Xiaohua was at the third or fourth stage of the qi refining stage, she could only use jade talismans. The first time she used a magic tool was the dragon binding hoop. She was already at the middle stage of the qi refining stage, but she could only activate the dragon binding hoop and use it to trap others. She couldn't release the true fire within the dragon binding hoop. The middle stage of the qi refining stage was an inconceivable existence in the current era of the immortal Tao. How could the younger generation of disciples from the various sects hope to catch up to her? Therefore, not to mention the real purple phoenix hairpin, even if the dragon binding hoop or the jade talisman were here, they might not be able to use it. In fact, when Jing Yi introduced the imitation of the purple phoenix hairpin, she deliberately avoided mentioning one thing. That was spiritual sense. While using a magic tool required Jinqi, controlling a magic tool relied more on one's spiritual sense. The lightning net created by the imitation of the purple phoenix hairpin required precise control over one's spiritual sense to be able to be executed. As for spiritual sense, unless one was at the late stage of the qi refining stage or used a sect's secret technique, it was impossible to generate spiritual sense. Although Jing Gang was older than Jing Yi, her cultivation was limited. She only managed to cultivate a weak spiritual sense with the help of the incense cult's secret technique. She was far inferior to Jing Yi. Before the incense cult's defensive formation was destroyed, Jing Yi received the formation and the cult's secret technique. Her spiritual sense was also incomparably powerful. It was even more powerful than Zhang Xiaohua's. Unfortunately, the dragon vein was absorbed by Zhang Xiaohua, and the restriction was broken by Zhang Xiaohua. Jing Yi's spiritual sense was immediately beaten back to its original state. But then again, even now, Jing Yi's spiritual sense was much weaker than Zhang Xiaohua's. In the eyes of the Jianghu disciples, she was still an immortal-like existence. She was far from a height they could reach in their lifetime. Jing Yi put the imitation hairpin back into the jade box and smiled. Wait until the hero here can escape from the top score. I'll personally give this hairpin and a manual on how to use it to him. Subsequently, the three female disciples placed the trays in their hands on the jade table beside the high platform, bowed, and retreated. Jing Yi turned around and asked, Elder, would you like to say a few words? Ba. Elder Chong stood up and nodded. To tell you the truth, the incense cults move this time. It's very generous, far beyond old monk's expectations. Since this old monk is already like this, I'm sure everyone here is tempted as well. A loud laughter rang out. The people below the stage did not expect Elder Chung to be so straightforward, and they all roared with laughter. Isn't that so? My eyes are burning and my hands are itching. Someone said boldly. Yes, everyone wants it. However, there are only 3 prizes. Therefore, I don't need to tell you that the sword competition will be very exciting. Everyone will be nervous. Then, Elder Chong changed the topic. However, this sword competition is a competition, not a battle of life and death. No matter what grudges you have in Jianghu, when you're here, you must forget the past. Here, Old Monk will reiterate the principle of the sword competition. You can't kill. If someone is merciless and takes the opponent's life, then you'll be disqualified from the sword competition immediately. You'll be expelled from Huayu Palace. Jing Yi and Garuda's expressions did not change, as if they already knew. Bai Yinqiu thought for a moment, looked at the audience, and asked, Master Chang Sheng, what if someone accidentally kills? Bai Zhangmin, the sword competition is the sword competition. It's about the word competition. This rule has been followed for thousands of years without exception. Whether it's intentional or not, you must be expelled. Elder Chang Sheng said without any trace of politeness. Bai Yinqiu could only nod and look at Zhang San. Zhang San seemed to be thinking about something else and did not pay attention. All right, Old Monk has finished speaking. I wish for the sword competition to end successfully and for all of you to have your wishes come true. After Elder Chang Sheng sat down, Jing Yi looked at the other 3 people. They were all silent, so she said, the sword competition begins." As she spoke, she struck a spell on the high platform. With a bang, the high platform shook slightly. Then in Huayu Palace and the square between the gaps of the audience, dozens and even hundreds of high platforms about 10 feet tall rose gradually. These high platforms were pulled up from the ground and rose little by little until they were about 10 feet tall. The audience below the high platform was stunned at first, but then they understood. They all looked at the high platform that was used as a fighting ring with interest. When the high platform stabilized, a white figure leaped onto the middle one. It was Nun Xuezhen, who was wearing a white palace dress and a mask. Nun Xuezhen stood on the high platform and bowed slightly to the audience. She said, "According to the order of the hierarch, I, Xuezhen, will be in charge of this sword competition. Now, I will tell you the specific rules." As soon as she finished speaking, the female disciple of the aroma sect who had served tea and snacks appeared again. But this time, she was holding a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. She placed them on everyone's table. Nun Xuezhen pointed at the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone and said, "In this sword competition, except for the Pai sect, the Tenryu sect, the Dalan Temple between the clouds and the water, and the Righteous Alliance, there are 4 places to participate. The other sects and schools only have 2 places to participate. This has been explained when the disciples of the Pai sect sent the invitations. Please write down the names of the disciples of your sects and schools who will participate in the sword competition. Then find a fighting ring like the one I am standing on. At the bottom of the fighting ring, there is a small round hole. You can put your name in there. There are 50 fighting rings like this inside Huayu Palace and outside the palace. Inside Huayu Palace, you can put 10 names on each fighting ring. Outside the palace, you can put 20 names on each fighting ring. Once the fighting ring is full, the small hole in the fighting ring will close. There are 230 sects in Huayu Palace. Each sect has 2 people, so there are 460 disciples participating in the sword competition. There are 50 fighting rings, so there are 40 empty spots. There are 512 sects outside the palace, so there are 1,024 disciples participating in the sword competition. There are 24 more disciples in the fighting rings. Please put the names of these 24 disciples into the fighting rings inside Huayu Palace. The small hole in the fighting rings will close after I finish speaking for 30 minutes. Only the disciples who put their names in during this time are qualified to participate in the sword competition. Otherwise, they will be considered as not participating. Each fighting ring will have 10 or 20 people. The fighting rings will be arranged by themselves. The other sects will guarantee fairness. For the sake of fairness, the 4 disciples of the other sect and the 16 disciples of the other 4 sects will not participate in the first round. Once the final winner has been determined in each arena, they will participate in the second round of the sword competition for the top 120 disciples. Nun Xuezhen continued to talk about the rules of each round of the sword competition. In the end, she said, "Just now, the leader of the other sect announced the rewards for the top 3. According to the rules of the sword competition, there will be 100 winners in the first round. These 100 disciples will receive 1 Yuhuandan pill, 1 small bone congealing pill, and 1 small revitalizing pill from the Dalan Temple as a reward. All right, please write down the names of your disciples participating in the sword competition on the paper and put them in the fighting rings. The first round of the sword competition is about to begin." As she spoke, a disciple of the incense cult brought a lit incense stick to the fighting ring where Nun Xuezhen was. When they heard Nun Xuezhen mention that the rewards for winning the first round of the sword competition were the legendary healing pills of the incense cult and the Dalan Temple, the crowd was in an uproar. The 3 rewards that Nun Jing had shown were indeed very tempting. Everyone was looking forward to it, but after all, not everyone had the hope to reach the last step. The 3 rewards were very likely to be won by the disciples of the 5 super sects in the end. On the contrary, Nun Xuezhen's words about the rewards for the final winner of the first round of the sword competition rekindled the fire of hope in everyone's hearts. Of course, 1 out of 10 people in Huayu Palace 1 out of 20 people outside Huayu Palace. All the young disciples present were outstanding disciples of their respective sections. Almost every one of them believed that they would definitely be the final winner. The 3 pills each represented a life, so how could they not be tempted? Therefore, when Nun Shuizhen said that they could begin, the leaders of each sect immediately picked up their brushes and wrote down the names of their disciples as fast as they could. They took one for themselves, and the other elder took one for themselves. Then, each of them used their lightness skills and threw their names into the fighting rings that they had already planned out. That's right, the sword competition was also about strategy. 2 disciples from each sect absolutely could not be placed in the same fighting ring. Moreover, were there any familiar sects nearby? Were there any disciples from other sects that they knew the ins and outs of? This all needed to be considered in the time it took for a stick of incense to burn. The sects that were closer to Huayu Palace had already taken the lead. They ran into the palace and threw the names of their 2 disciples into the fighting rings. Nonsense. The palace only chose 1 out of 10. Although their martial arts might be a little higher, their chances were still much higher. For a moment, the inside and outside of Huayu Palace was in chaos. Occasionally, there were people who used their lightness skills and almost collided with each other. There were also people who had just chosen a fighting ring and were about to throw their names in. In the end, they were thrown in by a hidden weapon technique from far away. Then, the small hole immediately disappeared. This person could only turn around and curse. He did not dare to delay and went to look for another fighting ring. As a result, in the end, more than 10 people ran out of Huayu Palace and shouted, "Where is the fighting ring? Where is the fighting ring?" It was because the smart leaders in the square had filled up the fighting rings in Huayu Palace. These people in Huayu Palace had no fighting ring to throw their names into. They had no choice but to look for the 1 out of 20 fighting rings in the square. The funny thing was, in the square, there were 512 sects and 1,024 people. They were all silent and stood there obediently, adhering to the rule of not speaking during the sword competition. Please cast a monthly vote, a recommendation vote, a collection, a tip. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to cast a recommendation vote or a monthly vote. Chapter 1039. The elders and sect leaders of the various sects saw this and knew what these people were thinking. With a stomp of their feet, they split up and rushed towards the 50 arenas in the plaza. 50 fighting rings were not a lot, but they covered the entire square and they had to search one by one. How could they be fast? These 10-plus people had a tacit understanding, and each of them found a different area. After a while, the burning candles were extinguished and the holes in the 100 arenas disappeared. One of the sect leaders looked on helplessly as the hole in front of him gradually became smaller. His heart grew anxious, and he rubbed the piece of paper in his hand and actually used a hidden weapon technique to throw it into the hole. Seeing that the ball of paper was about to fall into the hole that had not completely disappeared, the sect leader's face revealed a smile. But at this moment, out of nowhere, a gust of wind suddenly blew past and blew the ball of paper askew. With a paw sound, it hit the spot where the hole had disappeared. The sect leader's face immediately turned pale, and he stood there in a daze. He looked at the clear and windless square, and then looked at the group of people who were gloating at his misfortune. His face immediately turned ashen. He didn't say anything and just looked at the various sects beside the stage. Then, without saying a word, he turned around and returned to Huayu Palace. "What's wrong with that old man, Xiao?" One of them was indignant and said in a low voice, "He didn't go in himself, and now he wants to find trouble with others? Look at him. I'm afraid he's blaming us for this. Who knows if he'll attack our sects once he leaves Chuanxiang cult? It's just Qingshan's sect. They have some connections with the Righteous Alliance. Now that Chuanxiang cult has appeared in Jianghu, can the Righteous Alliance still control Jianghu?" That's right. The Dalan Temple was a master who ignored the Righteous Alliance and allowed them to do whatever they wanted. Now that Chuanxiang cult has appeared, They will not let the Righteous Alliance be the only sect. Sect leaders, I think sect leader who is right. We need to discuss this. Although Qingshan's sect is not big, it's not something any of us can deal with. Why don't we? Brother Yu is right. After the martial arts convention, we need to meet up and leave together. Don't fall into Qingshan's sect's trap. Sigh, when the fragrance spreads, Jianghu is in chaos. The incense cult had only just held a martial arts assembly. They had not even taken a step out of Dianchi Lake, but they had already stirred up a lot of trouble. This didn't include the Misty School that was rushing to Misty Peak. When the sect leaders returned to Huayu Palace with hatred in their hearts, Abbess Shuizhen's voice was heard again. Everyone, the name list for each arena has been decided. As for which Xiaoxia and which Xiaoxia will fight, it is up to the arena to decide. The cult of incense will not interfere. However, my perfuming school will send an inner disciple to act as a witness for each battle arena. This disciple will not judge the outcome of the battle arena, but will only place the winner's name back into the arena. As for the outcome of the battle between the two Xiaoxia in the arena, it is also simple. As long as one of them falls out of the arena within the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the remaining one will be the winner. If neither of them falls out of the arena within the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, then, I'm sorry, but both of them will be disqualified from the next round. There will be no incense burning in each arena. When the battle begins, the arena will descend by itself. When the arena is level with the ground, it will only take the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. Well, sect leaders, is there anything else you want to ask? A voice called out, Abbess Shuizhen, if both of them fall out of the arena, then will the one who falls out of the arena be the winner? If both of them fall out of the arena, then both of them will be disqualified from the next round. Abbess Shuizhen said firmly. After waiting for a while and seeing that no one else was asking, Abbess Shuizhen said, Okay, then the battle arena will begin now. If there is anything special, please ask the perfuming school disciple in charge of the arena. As he spoke, 100 young disciples dressed in palace attire with veils covering their faces filed in and walked to their respective arenas. Their bodies did not move, but they floated to the edge of the arenas and stood on the edge of the arenas with the tips of their feet. Their entire bodies were outside of the arenas. Good, seeing such a high level of Qinggong, very few people praised. Seeing that all the disciples were in place, Abbess Shuizhen looked back. At this time, the restriction on the high platform where Abbess Jingyi and the others were standing had been removed. Abbess Jingyi nodded slightly. Abbess Shuizhen took out a 3-inch long stick from her bosom and pointed it in the air. Ha! With a crisp sound, the 100 arenas released a pale white screen of light at the same time. After a while, 2 lines of large words appeared on each arena. Su Jingwen of the Firmament Dock, Lu Cheng of the Qi Huanmen. Beside the arena where Abbess Shuizhen stood, everyone looked at the large words on the screen of light in shock and read them out loud. What? Is it really chosen by the arena itself? One person couldn't believe his eyes. Nonsense, it's already the name. What's there to not believe? The way of immortality is really magical. While everyone was talking, 2 good-looking disciples stepped out of the crowd and flew onto the arena. They cupped their hands and saluted to everyone. Then they walked onto the arena. One of them cupped his hands and said, I am Lu of Qi Huanmen. While Lu Cheng was complaining inwardly, he suddenly felt the air behind his feet. He was shocked. He was at the edge of the arena. If he took half a step back, he would fall off the arena. Seeing that he couldn't dodge the kick, Lu Cheng of Qi Huanmen clenched his teeth. He didn't circulate his internal energy, but jumped forward to grab the leg of the Heavens Vault Doc's disciple, even if he got injured. The Heavens Doc's disciple already had a plan in mind. First, he would reveal an opening and send his leg towards Lu Cheng. This was just a feint. When Lu Cheng's hand reached his eyes, he immediately lowered his body and kicked Lu Cheng's leg that was still standing on the stage. Lu Cheng's upper body was still on the stage, but the lower part of his body was outside the stage. At this moment, Lu Cheng didn't have time to grab the disciple of the Firmament Dock. He stretched out his hand and tried to grab the edge of the arena. Seeing this, the disciple of the firmament Doc pointed his scabbard at Lu Cheng's forehead. Seeing that the scabbard was about to touch his forehead, Lu Cheng sighed helplessly and let go of his left hand. He somersaulted in the air and landed steadily on the ground. At this moment, the disciple of the firmament Doc stood up and cupped his hands. "I am Su Jingwen of the firmament Doc." From the moment Lu Cheng cupped his hands to the moment he was kicked out of the arena, only a few breaths of time had passed. The disciple of the firmament Doc didn't introduce himself too late. "Senior sister of the incense school. This guy, he cheated," Lu Cheng said to the disciple of the incense school, who was standing at the edge of the arena. The disciple of the firmament Doc, Su Jingwen, stood on the arena with a smile and didn't say anything. The disciple of the incense school looked at him and said coldly, "You have already won. Get down from the arena." "Yes, senior sister." Su Jingwen smiled and jumped down from the arena. The disciple of the incense school thought for a while and said, "Senior sister Xuezhen said that as long as you leave the arena, you lose. You don't have to care about anything else." After saying that, he jumped down from the arena and wrote a piece of paper. He slapped the surface of the arena and a small hole appeared. He threw the piece of paper into the hole and jumped back into the arena. After the small hole was sealed, 2 more names appeared on the white screen. This time, the 2 of them weren't as careless as Lu Cheng from the firmament Doc. They fought carefully. Although there were 100 battles, the martial arts of these young disciples, how could they enter senior sister Jing Yi's eyes? She glanced at them and looked at the people beside her. She smiled and said, "Everyone, please take a seat. I will be back soon." Garuda glanced at senior sister Jing Yi and ignored her. The elder smiled and said, "Senior sister Jing Yi, please go ahead." Bai Yanxiu and Zhang San bowed slightly. Senior sister Jing Yi walked down from the arena. Peacock, Chun Chun, and the other disciples followed behind her and entered a small hall in Huayu Palace. The moment she entered the small hall, Nun Jingyi's face immediately became gloomy. She silently walked to a chair, but before she could sit down, she stretched out her hand and slammed it on the table beside her. The table didn't change at first, but after a few breaths, it suddenly collapsed and turned into powder that fell to the ground. Everyone was shocked. Even Chun shrunk his neck and didn't dare to speak. "This is too much." Senior sister Jing Yi stood in front of the chair with her back to the crowd and said angrily. Perhaps it was because she had vented her anger on the table, but at this time, although senior sister Jing Yi was furious, her tone also seemed to be helpless. "Leader," Peacock looked at the crowd and said, "I wonder, is there anything I can help with? Could it be because of the sword competition?" Senior sister Jing Yi thought for a moment and sighed. In a martial world, there will always be things that are difficult to settle. If you can't tolerate what others can't, then you must have the ability to do what others can't. Peacock, you must remember this in the future. "Yes, leader, I understand." Peacock answered nervously. All right, all of you, go out and call Yin from the distant fire palace." Deputy Palace Master Yin. Yin was stunned and nodded in response. She was the first to go out, and the others followed. "Peacock, Chun Chun, you two stay." Senior sister Jing Yi called out as the crowd walked out. Peacock looked at Chun Chun, stopped, and walked back into the hall. The other disciples knew that the 2 of them had different identities, so naturally, they didn't say much and left quietly. After a while, Yin from the distant fire palace still hadn't arrived. Someone else did. She stood outside the small hall and seemed to be thinking and hesitating. A voice came from inside the hall. "Xiaqing, you, what's the matter?" Chapter 1040. When Xiaqing heard the voice of Nun Jing Yi, the hesitation on her face turned into determination. She clenched her teeth and walked into the hall. "Xiaqing, you've been loitering at the door for a long time. Is there something urgent?" Nun Jing Yi's face didn't look good. Sect leader, looking at Nun Jing Yi, Xiaqing panicked and stammered, "It's nothing. I just came to see if there's anything I can do." Nun Jing Yi sneered. "Xiaqing, If there's anything, just tell me. I'll make the decision for you on why you peak. This. Nun Jingyi's power had already scared Xia Qing out of her wits. But now, she had no choice but to throw herself on the ground and cry, "Sect Master, please show mercy." Disciple. Disciple asks Sect Master to allow Disciple to participate in the sword competition. Nun Jingyi was stunned. She looked at Peacock and Chen Shun, who were also at a loss, and shook their heads slightly. "Xia Qing, get up first," Nun Jingyi said with a pleasant face. "Didn't I already say it before? Let the male disciples of Ruijin Palace go. It's better if the female disciples of Immerse Palace don't go on stage." Do you have other ideas? Sect leader. Xia Qing stood up straight and looked at the three people in the hall. She sucked her lips and said, "Sect leader, since the failure of the Refining Heart Cave, I've been anxious. I want to find an opportunity on the path of immortality. I know I can't compare with Senior Peacock, Senior Qin Shun, and even Junior Yuyin, but my heart is no worse than theirs. The three senior sisters have already obtained the inheritance of the path of immortality. I also want to fight for a chance in the sword competition." This. Nun Jingyi sucked in a breath of cold air. She didn't expect that Xia Qing, a disciple who usually didn't show off, would have such a strong desire for Taoism. After thinking for a while, she said, "I've already explained to you about the sword competition before. The blade-breaking force belongs to the Godly Knife sect. Although it's an excellent secret manual for practicing martial arts, it's only effective for male disciples. Female disciples won't have much effect if they practice it. Our aroma cult also has secret manuals on martial arts." "Oh, Xia Qing, you want to fight for those 5 elements primordial stones?" Abbess Jingyi suddenly realized. "Yes, Lord Hierarch." Seeing that Jingyi Shirtai didn't have any angry expression, Xia Qing was secretly happy. She said, "Disciple knows that Sir Hierarch is magnanimous. Our Immerse Palace also has a lot of secret manuals on martial arts. Once disciples' martial arts reach a certain level, they could be bestowed. Although disciples' internal strength cultivation method can't compare to Senior Sister Peacock's and Senior Sister Chen Chen's heavenly mortal cultivation method, disciple is confident that disciple will be bestowed by Sir Hierarch in her lifetime. So, you want to get the 5 elements primordial stones first to lay the foundation for your future cultivation? Disciple indeed has such a plan. I hope Sir Hierarch can grant my wish. How's Elder Jing Fan's martial arts? What level of attainment was the Mortal Heart Sutra that she cultivated? Why didn't our cult give her the 5 elements primordial stones? Have you ever thought about it?" Disciple. Disciple knows that the 5 elements primordial stones are very precious. Even our Immerse Palace doesn't have many left. And the rest are for Senior Sister Peacock, Senior Sister Qin Shun, and Junior Sister Yuyin to cultivate. Not to mention Disciple. Even Elder Jing Fan and the previous Great Elder Jing Gang didn't have any, so you want to take advantage of this sword competition to get the primordial stones first? But such a precious thing, why don't we keep it for ourselves? Instead, we get it to outsiders? This. Disciple didn't think too much about it. Disciple only thought that the primordial stones are very few. If we don't fight for it now, in the future, there may not be such an opportunity. So, Disciple steeled her heart to beg Sir Hierarch. "Good." Nun Jingyi clapped her hands and said, "Seeking the Tao always has a sequence. If you fight for it first, you'll cut off the path of others. If you don't fight for it, others will fight for it. Since you came to beg our cult, what's wrong with us agreeing to your request?" "Thank you, Sir Hierarch." Xia Qing was so excited that she almost cried. "Don't be in such a hurry to thank me. I haven't finished speaking." Nun Jingyi said lightly, "Our cult gave you a chance this time, which is equivalent to giving you the chance to cultivate the Tao of immortality. In the future, when you're successful in martial arts and have the chance to enter the Tao of immortality, our cult, Disciple knows. Disciple doesn't dare to hope that Sir Hierarch will give me another chance. Our Mo Ning Palace has a lot of disciples. Disciple has received this chance and won't fight for the next one. It's good that you know. Then you may leave. In a while, during the sword competition, you'll replace Yuan Hong. Tell him now. This is our order. Disciple understands. Disciple will go now. Xiaqing smiled and ran out after thanking her. Remember not to wear a veil and don't wear a palace dress. Nun Jingyi's voice came from behind. Yes, disciple knows. Xiaqing was in a good mood. After Xiaqing left, Peacock said softly, Sir Hierarch, if Xiaqing wins the 5 elements primordial stone, then Sir Hierarch's plan will be disrupted? Sigh. Yes, it will inevitably be affected. Nun Jingyi sighed. This girl is so focused on cultivating the Tao of immortality. How can she not understand that the 5 elements primordial stone is a bait that our cult is giving to the entire Jianghu? Isn't that so? Even I understand. How can Xiaqing not know? Qinshin was also puzzled. She has walked into a dead end. Nun Jingyi shook her head. This girl met the immortal sect's Huan Senior in Huanshu and saw the magic of the immortal sect. How could she think so much? Forget it, Sir Hierarch, don't worry. It's good to let her go to the arena and let the people of Jianghu see the power of our inner disciples. Don't we still have the imitation purple phoenix hairpin and the broken sword force? They are also very useful. Hee. Nun Jingyi sneered. Xiaqing is a bit narrow-minded. She thinks that our cult doesn't send disciples from Mo Xian Palace and only sent disciples from Ruijin Palace. This means that the disciples of the other sects are no match for the disciples of Mo Xian Palace. On the other hand, I don't know if the Tenryu sect will participate. If they participate, won't they take away all those things? No, Sir Hierarch, it's useless for them to take those things. Qinshin smiled. Then we have to consider between the clouds and the water. Do you think that Bai Yinxiu will tolerate the broken sword force that originally belonged to him being lost in Jianghu? Since she wants to keep the broken sword force, how can she let go of the 5 elements primordial stone? Peacock, among the disciples in white brought by between the clouds and the water, are some of them the ones who tried to kill you outside Yinchi Lake that day? Yes, Sir Hierarch, your disciples saw them a long time ago. One of them was Liang Sangshu, who tried to kill me that day. It's just that the other 3 who besieged me are not here. See, Liang Sangshu's martial arts are not worse than yours. Although you have received the inheritance and can be considered a person of immortality, your foundation is still shallow, and you can't show any magical powers. Even if you fight with Liang Sangshu now, you may not be able to win. Xiaqing is even less likely. I'm afraid Xiaqing may not be able to do as she wishes. Peacock suddenly thought of saying. She was too smart and gave Qing her life instead. At this time, Nun Jingyi raised her eyebrows and looked at the entrance of the small hall. After a while, there was the sound of light footsteps, and someone asked, Sir Hierarch, your subordinate is the deputy of the fiery temple, Yinin. Why are you looking for me? Is this Yinin from the fiery temple? Come in. Yes, your subordinate obeys. When Yinin came in, Peacock and Chun bowed slightly. Deputy Temple Master Yin, do you have a disciple called Zhang Pinger? Nun Jingyi asked directly. Yinin was startled and said in a panic, this subordinate does have a disciple called Zhang Pinger, but this child's temperament is calm, and she doesn't cause trouble. Previously, the matter with Great Elder Jing Gang's disciple and the Protector's disciple was all a misunderstanding. This subordinate has already punished Zhang Pinger. She shouldn't bother Mo Xian Palace's Protector's disciple. In Miss Zixia, seeing that Yin had said so much, Nun Jingyi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After Yin finished speaking, she said, I have already punished all of you for that matter. I won't mention it again in the future. Today, I'm looking for you because of another matter regarding Zhang Pinger. Yin was stunned and blurted out. This time, which hall's disciple is it? Which hall's disciple? Nun Jingyi laughed coldly. It's Garuda. Garuda, he's not a very famous disciple. May I ask which hall this disciple is from, Sir Hierarch? Your subordinate will punish them right away. Ineen was very puzzled. Hee, Garuda of the Tenryu sect. Not to mention you. Even I want to punish him. When you go, remember to bring me along. Garuda, what's his relationship with Zhang Pinger? Een was stunned. Thus, Nanjing recounted everything that had happened on the platform. Before Een could speak, Chun said angrily, Sir Hierarch, how can this be? Is it possible that this guy said that whoever has the hidden fire meridians is the one? That he can take whoever he wants away with him? Peacock bit her lips, and her face turned slightly pale. At this moment, she understood Nanjing Yi's reaction when they first arrived at the small hall and the meaning behind her words. After thinking for a moment, Een asked tentatively, Sir Hierarch, what do you plan to do? What plan? Nanjing Yi smiled bitterly. Your subordinate has already called you here. What do you think I plan to do? Sigh, poor child. Een also sighed. Garuda's words make sense. Unless Sir Hierarch has Zhang Pinger by your side at all times, with Garuda's lightness skill, it's really easy for him to kidnap Zhang Pinger. But I can't even protect a small disciple from the distant fire temple. This makes me feel very ashamed. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Moreover, this is the time for our incense sect to re-enter the martial arts world. If we fall out with the Tenryu sect because of this, the gains will not make up for the losses. Moreover, Sir Hierarch's plan must be an expedient plan. In the future, Een could not say what would happen in the future. Chapter 1041. Yes, in the future. What could they do? Zhang Pinger had followed Garuda to Heavenly Dragon Sect. Not to mention whether Fragrance Cult had the ability to get Zhang Pinger back in the future. Even if Fragrance Cult could get Zhang Pinger back, would Zhang Pinger still be the same Zhang Pinger at that time? Seeing that Een was silent, Nanjing Yi was also silent. Peacock and Chun were even more silent. Peacock and Chun at this moment were probably more lucky that they were now disciples of the inheritance cult. Moreover, they were lucky that they weren't born with a gift. Sigh, poor Zhang Pinger. Chun was silent for a moment and said unconsciously, first, she was dumped by Yu Zhuochuan, and then she was played by Ren Xiaoyao. Now, she finally calmed down, but she was valued by Garuda, senior sister apprentice. Is this the legendary fate of beautiful women? You, shut up. Without waiting for Peacock to speak, Nanjing Yi couldn't help but scold. Yu Zhuochuan. We don't even know where her corpse is. Besides, there's nothing between him and Zhang Pinger. Ren Xiaoyao. Don't even mention him. He's wholeheartedly looking for Zixia. Zhang Pinger is just wishful thinking. Chun curled her lips and muttered, I just think that Ren Xiaoyao is heartless. Thump. Peacock heard it clearly, and her heart tightened for no reason. Nanjing Yi ignored her and turned to Een. Deputy Temple Master Een has been the Deputy Temple Master of the Flame Temple for many years. I've also been paying attention to you for a long time. You're excellent in all aspects, and now is the time for the Fragrance Cult to step out into the world. It's also time for you to show your skills. I think it's time for you to change places and take on more responsibilities. Een heard this and was pleasantly surprised. He bowed and said, Thank you for your promotion. This is the result of your many years of hard work. No need to thank me. Nanjing Yi waved her hand and said, Go and tell Zhang Pinger that on her shoulders is the hope of the revival of the Fragrance Cult. Her responsibility is also great. Let her remember that as long as she's a disciple of the Fragrance Cult, no matter where she is, she's a disciple of the Fragrance Cult. I know this. Yes, I understand. Moreover, Zhang Pinger's sacrifice today will be recorded in the history of the church by the disciples. Her sacrifice today, in exchange for the glory of the incense cult tomorrow, will definitely earn the respect of the younger disciples. Her tears will not be in vain. This subordinate understands. This subordinate will explain this matter to Zhang Pinger. Alas, now that things have come to this, we can only face reality. Een agreed and left. When she was far away, Chun Shun called out again, "Sir Hierarch, how can we record this?" Peacock scolded from the side. Chun Shun, shut up, senior sister, but if this matter was to be recorded in the ancient records, how could Lord Seckmaster let bystanders withdraw? Only the two of us are left. Peacock frowned and said, "You and I are the next generation successors of the Order of Incense. Our leader has put in a lot of effort to show us the cruelty of Jianghu and how difficult it is for the female disciples of the Order of Incense to survive in Jianghu. If it wasn't for the circumstances, why would our leader allow her disciples to sacrifice themselves? If we don't harden our hearts, if we don't bear the humiliation, how can the Order of Incense flourish in our hands?" But Chun Shun was still unconvinced. Didn't Lord Seckmaster say that? As long as we have supernatural powers that others don't have, won't we still be able to bring the Order of Incense to greater heights? Chun Shun, you still don't understand. If we were the #1 person in Jianghu, would we still make such a decision today? If we were flying in the air in front of Rejuvenation Valley, using a flying sword to kill the immortal seniors of Longting Villa, would we still make such a decision? Everything is decided by strength. In this Jianghu, only strength is believed. Hua! A soft sound came from outside the hall. Ha! Nanjing used her divine sense to scan the area and laughed. All right, there will be a conclusion. We still have to pass the days of the Order of Incense. Let's finish this martial arts convention first. When Nanjing led Peacock and Chun Shun back to the main hall of Huayu Palace, the 100 winners had already been decided. The hua-hua sound came from the inner disciples of the Order of Incense handing out the jade bottles containing the Yuandan pill, bone-solidifying pill, and small revitalizing pill to the 100 disciples. The audience cheered and applauded. To the 100 disciples and their sex, this was already the final victory. It was enough for them to record it in their sex records. The rest could only fight for glory. The main characters on the stages were not destined to be theirs. After that, the 50 stages in the square slowly returned to the ground. Of the 50 stages in Huayu Palace, other than the 8 stages in front of the main platform, the other 42 stages also returned to the ground. Everyone knew that in the second round of the sword discourse, the 120 disciples would compete in these 8 stages to determine the final 8 spots. Sure enough, the 100 female disciples of the fragrant religion who were supervising the first round of the sword arena went to the middle of the ring. There was already a small hole in the middle of the ring, and these female disciples put the winner's name into the small hole. All right, the first round of the sword discourse has already determined the 100 disciples. I represent the Order of Incense to congratulate these disciples. I hope that they can continue to work hard and improve their martial arts to the next level. I hope that they can shine brightly in Jianghu. Nun Xuezhen jumped onto the stage and smiled. Next up is the second round of the sword discourse. As everyone can see, there are 8 stages, including the 4 disciples of the Order of Incense, the 4 disciples of the Dalan Temple, the 4 disciples of the Order of Righteous Tao, the 4 disciples of Between the Clouds and the Water, and the 4 disciples of the Tenryu sect. There are a total of 120 disciples competing for the 8 spots. 4 disciples will be selected from these 8 winners. The 4 disciples will compete in the sword discourse. The winner will compete for the top spot of the sword discourse, while the loser will compete for the top spot of the sword discourse. All right, the Order of Incense will send out 4 disciples and place their names on the stage. The other 4 sects, please also place the names of the disciples from their sects who will be participating in the sword discourse. As soon as Nun Xuezhen finished speaking, 4 people walked in from outside the hall, 1 woman and 3 men. Seeing the appearance of the female disciple, not only was Nun Xuezhen stunned, but all the disciples of the Order of Incense were also stunned. Nun Xuezhen turned to look at Nanjing in surprise. Nanjing nodded slightly. Only then did Nun Xuezhen suppress the confusion in her heart. The 4 people jumped onto the stage and bowed to Nanjing. They said, "We are Hu Bin from the Ruijin Palace, Yang Biao from the Greenwood Palace, Li Yifan from the Thick Earth Palace, Xia Qing from the Distant Fire Palace." Greetings to all the sect leaders. Nanjing, wave her hand. The four people threw the paper in their hands into the small hole in the stage and stood at the side of the stage with their hands by their sides. Then, four disciples from the Order of the Righteous Alliance also jumped out. They were all slightly older. They went onto the stage and bowed. We are Lu Jihua, Chu Feng, Wu Shanghong, and Li Feng from the Order of the Righteous Alliance. Greetings to all the sect leaders. On the stage, Alliance Master Zhang San's face was slightly dark. The corners of his eyes twitched. He knew that while the Order of the Righteous Alliance was famous in the world of martial artists and had been able to summon the wind and summon the rain over the past few decades, that was just the feeling of a normal sect in the world of martial artists. Compared to the sect beside him, his foundation was far too lacking. Disregarding everything else, the older disciples on the stage might not have been famous in the world of martial artists, but they were already extremely outstanding figures among the next generation of disciples in the Order of the Righteous Alliance. They had come to the Order of the Righteous Alliance this time to let them broaden their horizons and did not plan to let them show their faces, but the rewards offered by the Order of the Righteous Alliance really moved him. He had been running the Order of the Righteous Alliance for so many years, and every time he thought of the four sects of the Immortal Path, he would feel a sense of inferiority from the bottom of his heart. He had been doing his best to search for the remains of the Immortal Path, hoping to find a way to enter the Immortal Path. However, even though he had spent a lot of effort and obtained a lot of secret manuals, jade slips, and so on, he had not been able to get a glimpse of the Immortal Path. This time, he was participating in the Order of the Righteous Alliance's martial arts assembly. He really did not expect that such a wonderful opportunity would be placed in front of him. Of course, he also believed that Nanjing definitely had some tricks she did not mention about these three items. But who was he? He was the leader of the Righteous Alliance, one of the three super sections. He firmly believed that even if Jing Yinan still had a trick up her sleeve, as long as he could get his hands on these three items, he would definitely be able to decipher the secret to becoming an immortal. After the Righteous Alliance, it was naturally the disciples of Between the Clouds and the Water. Bai Yinqiu seemed to be determined to win Between the Clouds and the Water too. He sent 4 disciples, including Liang Sangxiu. At this moment, only the disciples of the Dalan Temple and the Tenryu sect seemed to be particularly relaxed. The disciples of the Dalan Temple stood there cautiously with their palms clasped together. They wore smiles on their faces as they watched the sword competition in a friendly manner. Compared to the rules of the disciples of the Dalan Temple, the Tenryu sect really didn't care about trifles. There were about 20 disciples of the Tenryu sect. They sat at 5 tables, either scratching their heads or resting with their eyes closed. A few of the chairs were empty. No one knew where they had gone, for people were sitting at one of the tables. A good-looking woman was holding the hand of a middle-aged man with snow-white hair who looked to be in his 30s. She whispered, "Little Ye, who do you think the Heavenly King will send?" "Shu Ajiao, don't talk. Whoever the Heavenly King sends will go. It's not up to us to judge." These 2 people were Qin Shuriwei and Su Jiaodong, whom Zhang Xiaohua was already familiar with. The 2 of them were separated from Zhang Xiaohua on the sea. Zhang Xiaohua fell into the sea and naturally had a different encounter. The 2 of them were also in the competition between the Tenryu sect and the government. They didn't suffer any injuries. The battle overseas only cost them a lot of manpower. When the ships approached, the Jianghu people, led by Su Jiaowang and the rest, had the upper hand. Of course, the Tenryu sect didn't want to offend the government too much. Although they knew that the ships that were chasing them had set sail without permission, they couldn't annihilate all of them. They only dispelled their arrogance and swaggered off. Chapter 1042. Qin Shuriwei caught Zhang Xiaohua to interrogate her about the pill furnace, which Sakura and the others didn't know about. If Qin Shuriwei could get her hands on it, it would be a great achievement. Even if she couldn't get her hands on it, she would have other relics of the way of immortality. Therefore, when she saw Zhang Xiaohua fall into the water, she knew that Zhang Xiaohua wouldn't survive, so she left and didn't mention this matter again. Of course, the power behind Zhang Xiaohua didn't show up later, and there were no clues, which made Qin Shuriwei quite sad. As for Su Jiaodong, when Qin Shuriwei returned to the Tenryu sect, she also went with her. The Flood Dragon of the Four Seas was a subordinate of the Tenryu sect, so Qin Shuriwei took Su Jiaodong with her. As for the status, who cared about it? Su Jiaodong saw Qin Shuriwei scolding her, so she stole a glance at Garuda, who was resting on the high platform with his eyes closed, and said in a low voice, "Little yeah, I know the disciples of the Tenryu sect don't lack this, but this cultivation method sounds very powerful and can be practiced to the way of immortality. Even if you don't mind, if you can get it and give it to my father, it won't be a waste of me serving you for so many years." Qin Shuriwei frowned. "Jiao, if you want it, I'll ask the Heavenly King for it. We have no reason to mess up the Heavenly King's plan. So, then, who do you think the Heavenly King will send?" This. Qin Shuriwei looked at the crowd and said in a low voice, "This cultivation method is meaningless to the disciples of the Tenryu sect, who will fight for this useless thing. I guess the Heavenly King doesn't plan to let the disciples fight at all." "Really?" Su Jiaodong's face lit up, and she said, "Then isn't this a good opportunity? If you volunteer to fight, you can make the Tenryu sect famous, and you can also get this secret manual for me. Isn't this killing two birds with one stone? This, are you going or not?" Su Jiaodong really acted like a spoiled child. Qin Shuriwei was helpless. She looked around and got up and went to the high platform. As Qin Shuriwei said, Garuda didn't take this matter seriously and didn't plan to let the disciples fight. But since Qin Shuriwei volunteered and had nothing to do, she nodded slightly. And the four disciples of the Dahlin. They were the four disciples of the third generation: Yuan Tong, Yuan, 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 and Yuan's Yuan. And Yuan. It seemed like Dahlin Temple and Dragon Sect had the same idea. The Tenryu sect was T. The Tenryu sect was B. On the sect TTSS. The Tess. They had to give face to the Tenryu sect, so they nodded. When Qin Shuriwei put the slip of paper with her name into the small hole in the arena, Abbess Shui Zhen patted the arena, and the small hole immediately disappeared. After a while, the 8 arenas were covered by a faint light screen. Nun Shuezhen said loudly, 117 disciples will be assigned to the 8 platforms. For the sake of fairness, disciples of the same sect will not appear in the same platform. As soon as she finished speaking, there was a buzzing sound. 2 lines of words appeared on the light screens of the 8 platforms. They were the names of the 2 people who were going to fight in the arena. The platforms looked very fair. Qin Shuriwei, who had just put his name in, was arranged to fight in the first round. When he saw his name, he frowned. When he saw his opponent, he became even more impatient. His opponent was an extremely young disciple from the Tenryu sect. When the disciple saw his opponent's name, he was stunned. He didn't expect to be so unlucky as to meet the Tenryu sect as soon as he got on the platform. Qin Shuriwei looked at him impatiently. It was as if he was a fly. If he didn't fly away, he might be swatted to death. Therefore, even though the disciple knew that injuries were prohibited on the platform, he still bowed and said with a smile, "I was very lucky to be able to pass the first round. To be able to meet Senior Brother Qin on the platform is a kind of fate. I know I'm not Senior Brother Qin's opponent, so I admit defeat." After he finished speaking, he jumped down from the platform. "Well, you're from the Tenryu sect. Not bad." Qin Shuriwei commented casually and jumped down from the platform. "Little you are so awe-inspiring." Su Jiaodong pulled Qin Shuriwei and whispered with a smile, "Sure, you're not afraid of being laughed at. I'm not awe-inspiring. It's the Tenryu sect's awe-inspiring." Qin Shuriwei said proudly. There were several more rounds, but they were all very boring. Whenever a disciple from the other sects met a disciple from one of the 5 major sects, they would all jump down from the platform and admit defeat. The only one who did so was a disciple from the floating mountain village. When he met Hu Bin, he saw Hu Bin's tall figure and thought he was clumsy. He wanted to use his superior Qigong to fight him. If he could gain something, he might become famous in Jianghu. Who would have thought that when Hu Ben swung his copper staff, he would be mesmerized by the sound of the soul-devouring rod. When he regained his senses, the thick copper staff was already on his forehead. He almost collapsed on the platform. His legs went soft, and he couldn't even walk. It was the floating mountain village's head who went up to the platform and carried him down. This disciple from the floating mountain village could be considered a lesson for those who came after him. Those who originally had some thoughts of being careful had long since given up. No one dared to challenge the dignity of the 5 major sections. The disciples of the 5 major sects had a smooth journey until the righteous alliance's Li Feng met the Dalan Temple's Yuan Wu. Li Feng was a tall man in his 30s. His weapon was different from the others. He used a white wax spear. When he saw his name appear at the same time as the Dalan Temple's name, he couldn't help but frown. He jumped onto the platform. Among the Dalan Temple's group, a short and thin disciple also jumped onto the platform. He held a very ordinary-looking wooden staff in his hand. Looking at his age, he seemed to be in his 20s. The two got on a platform and saluted each other. Li Feng waved his spear, and the red-tasseled spear tip exploded. He called out, "Young Master Yuan Wu, I'm older. I'll let you have one move." Yuan Wu waved the wooden staff in a circle in front of him. He raised one hand and nodded. "Many thanks, Benefactor Li, for letting me win." As soon as he finished speaking, Yuan Wu didn't hold back and swung the wooden staff towards Li Feng's waist. Yuan Wu was originally a lower-generation disciple of the Dalan Temple. He was lucky enough to be chosen to come to the incense cult. Elder Chang'ing made it clear that it was a matter of experience and experience. If he really cared about face, Kong Chan, Kong Jian, and the other disciples behind him would have been chosen long ago. Before the wooden staff could get close to Li Feng's body, the sound of the wind could be heard. "Good move!" Li Feng shouted and leaped up like a sparrowhawk. Looking at his qin gong, it was obvious that his qin gong was better than Yuan Wu's qin gong. Yuan Wu's attack was obviously meant to test Li Feng's strength. When he saw that Li Feng's qin gong was good, he immediately retracted his staff. He was afraid that Li Feng would have more powerful moves waiting for him. Li Feng was disappointed when he saw that Yuan Wu didn't chase after him. Yuan Wu's move was indeed a bait. Once Yuan Wu chased after him, Li Feng would give him a thunderous strike. Unfortunately, he could only land on the ground, turn his spear, and stab with all his heart. There were very few people who used spears in Jianghu. Those who used such a weapon would have extraordinary moves. Sure enough, Li Feng's spear was like a dragon that came out of the sea. It circled around Yuan Wu's body. As long as there was a slight opening, he would be able to break through the door. Unfortunately, Yuan Wu's performance disappointed Li Feng once again. When Yuan Wu saw that he was inferior to Li Feng, he immediately brandished his wooden stick and countered Li Feng's every move. He was not greedy and did not attack recklessly. The saying that the world's martial arts originated from the Dalan Temple might be an exaggeration, but there was some truth to it. Other than the widely spread Arhut fist and Liuha fist, they all originated from the Dalan Temple. Even the Chi Mei staff technique originated from the Dalan Temple. As for the monks of Dalan Temple, their martial arts might not reach the pinnacle, but all of them had excellent fundamentals. This was the same for Yuan Wu. Since he had accepted his position, Li Feng really didn't have any good ideas. If it was under normal circumstances, Li Feng would know that as long as he attacked for a while, this monk would definitely show an opening. However, this was the sword discourse arena, and there was only an incense stick's worth of time left. More than half of the time had already passed, and there were no signs of an opening. Li Feng couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Thinking about Alliance Master Zhang San's warning and his deep gaze, Li Feng clenched his teeth and circulated his energy, thrusting his spear forward. Whoosh! It actually caused the sound of the wind as it pierced straight towards Yuan Wu's face. Yuan Wu didn't dare to be careless. He held his wooden stick horizontally, blocking Li Feng's spear, and lifted it up, raising the spearhead above his head. At this moment, Yuan Wu's eyes slightly looked up at the spearhead. With a slight movement of his hand, Li Feng's hand cracked into 3 parts. Li Feng strode forward and raised the end of the spear with his right hand, as if he was using a 3-part stick. With a whoosh, his wooden stick smashed onto Yuan Wu's wooden stick. Bang! Bam! The 2 sticks collided. A wave of pain came from the area between Monk Yuan Wu's thumb and forefinger. Monk Yuan Wu had received several heavy blows from Li Feng, and his hand was already cracked. This time, Li Feng used all his strength. How could his hands not bleed? Feeling the huge force from Li Feng's 3-section staff, Monk Yuan Wu felt bitter. However, he still forcefully channeled his inner energy and raised his arms to withstand the force. Then, he spun his left leg and kicked towards Li Feng's lower body. Hee. Seeing that Monk Kong Wu had the intention of attacking Li Feng's weak point to save his weak point, Li Feng understood. He used the momentum to dodge and pulled out his left hand. With a slight movement of his fingers, a flash of light came out from his sleeve. It was a sharp dagger. Li Feng held the dagger in his left hand and bent his body. He channeled his inner energy and stabbed it towards Monk Yuan Wu's chest. Please vote for me. Please vote for me. Please keep it. Please tip me. Chapter 1043. Monk Yuan Wu's heart sank when he saw Li Feng's dagger stabbing towards his chest. He knew that if he did not pull out his wooden stick, he would not be able to block the attack. However, Li Feng was still holding the spear in his right hand, and he was still holding the spear tip. If he pulled out his wooden stick, he would still be stabbed by the spear tip. Therefore, Monk Yuan Wu made up his mind. With one hand holding the wooden stick, he pulled out his other hand and leaned forward. Facing Li Feng's incoming momentum, he grabbed Li Feng's dagger with his bare hand. Li Feng's attack was very fast. He did not expect Kong Wu to be so reckless. He was stunned. Just as he was hesitating, Kong Wu's hand grabbed the dagger. Immediately, the sharp blade cut Kong Wu's palm and blood dripped down the dagger. Although the monks of the Dalan Temple were calm, they all exclaimed. Even Abbot Chang Sheng, who was watching from afar, was stunned. Umitba, it's not good to have too much anger. Ha, you old monk. This brave monk is bleeding for the sake of the Dalan Temple's reputation. How can you say that? I like it. If you don't want it, you can give it to the Tenryu sect. Garuda laughed. The Dalan Temple's reputation is not something that can be determined by this sword competition. Even if he loses, what can he do? Elder Changsheng shook his head. Alliance Master Zhang San's face was livid. Kong Wu was just a junior disciple of the Dalan Temple, but he had such a strong disciple. He was able to tie with the outstanding disciple he had selected in such a short time. This was something he had not expected. At this moment, a voice shouted, "Time's up!" Li Feng from the Alliance of Righteous Sects and Yuan Wu from the Dalan Temple are both eliminated. Li Feng was anxious when he heard this. When he looked again, the arena was already as high as the ground. This sword discourse was considered to be over. Sigh. Li Feng put away his dagger and spear and smiled bitterly. Little monk, you really wanted it. I admit defeat. Yuan Wu endured the pain and clasped his hands together. The blood flowed down his wrist. He forced a smile and said, Thank you for showing mercy, benefactor. Li Feng shook his head helplessly as he looked at the high platform. Alliance Master Zhang San's ashen face had disappeared and was replaced by a smile. Thump! Li Feng was startled. He knew that Alliance Master Zhang was beyond furious. But what could he do? With the righteous alliances Li Feng as an example, in the future, no one dared to hold back in the sword conference. As long as they went on stage, they would all use their ultimate moves, afraid that they would be eliminated because of the delay. The monks of the Dalan Temple, on the other hand, seemed to have received instructions from the great Master Chang'an. They no longer fought as fiercely as Yuan Wu. Whenever there was a slightly dangerous move, they would immediately withdraw. If the opponent forced them, they would immediately jump off the ring and admit defeat. But even so, under the mercy of the incense cult and the Dalan Temple, when the winners of the last 8 rings were determined, except for the disciples of the 5 great sects, the disciples of the other sects were all eliminated. Of course, Even though these disciples had been eliminated, they were still able to exchange blows with the experts of the five great sects under a situation where their lives were not in danger. This was extremely beneficial to their cultivation of the martial Tao. This was probably even more precious than the Jade Restoration Pill. Therefore, even though they had been knocked out of the arena, their faces were still flushed red and they were in high spirits. There was absolutely no dejection. The 8 disciples of the 5 great sects were Xiaqing and Hu Ben from the incense cult, Liang Cangshu, Hisu, and Qin Yang from between the clouds and the water, Yuan Tong from the Dalan Temple, Qin Shuriwei from the Tenryu sect, and Wu Shanghong from the Righteous Alliance. In terms of the number of disciples, between the clouds and the water, who went all out and sent out a strong lineup, had 3 disciples who won. Similarly, the Righteous Alliance, who were determined to win, only had 1 disciple. The strength of the 2 sects could be seen from this. As for Xiaqing, as an inner disciple, of course her martial arts were much better than the average disciple. It was very normal for her to win. When the list of the 8 people came out, 4 of the 8 arenas were retracted into the ground. The supervising disciples of the fragrant religion sent the list of the 8 people into the small holes in the arenas. Not long after, on the light screen of the 4 arenas, 2 lines of big words appeared. Xiaqing from the incense cult, Qin Shuriwei from the Tenryu sect, Hu Ben from the incense cult, Hisu from between the clouds and the water, Yuan Tong from the Dalan Temple, Liang Cangshu from between the clouds and the water, Wu Shanghong from the Righteous Alliance, Qin Yang from between the clouds and the water. The crowd was in an uproar. Judging from the performance in the sword competition arena just now, Xiaqing's martial arts were very high. She easily won several times. The same was true for Qin Shuriwei from the Tenryu sect. Her flexible sword was like a snake, and it was difficult for her opponent to resist. Everyone thought that these 2 would meet in the end. Unexpectedly, they met at the beginning of the competition. For a time, many people surrounded the 2 rings, wanting to see the battle between the peak of martial arts. They saw Xiaqing look at her name. Her expression didn't change at all. She used her Qin Gong from the Tenryu sect and floated onto the ring. Qin Shuriwei from the Tenryu sect was also very elegant. She waved her flexible sword like a folding fan in her hand. She took a step and stepped onto the ring as if she was climbing a very low flight of stairs. Good, everyone applauded. They were all discerning people. Naturally, they knew that the 2's Qin Gong was not ordinary. If it was purely a competition of Qin Gong, Qin Shuriwei was slightly better than Xiaqing. Miss, look at your hand. It's much higher than the others. As far as I know, Lihua Temple doesn't seem to have a female disciple with such high martial arts, right? Qin Shuriwei asked with a smile. Xiaqing didn't pay attention to him. She waved her flexible sword and said coldly, "If you think you're not a match for me, you should get off the ring as soon as possible. You're saving face for the Tenryu sect and also leaving room for both of our sections. Why are you being so long-winded again?" Qin Shuriwei was furious and said, "You little girl, I'm just afraid of hurting you. I just want to give you a few words of advice." Without waiting for Qin Shuriwei to finish, Xiaqing waved her hand. Her flexible sword was also like a dragon exploring the sea. "Oh, little girl, you're really vicious," Qin Shuriwei said, but his hands didn't stop. He used his internal force and waved it. His flexible sword straightened like an ordinary long sword. With a chi sound, it met Xiaqing's attack. Both of them were from famous sects and were well-known figures in their own sections. Their swordsmanship, moves, and mastery of their internal energy were not far apart. They were evenly matched and had met their match. After fighting for half an incense stick's worth of time, the 2 soft swords had not clashed. Everyone below the ring was dumbfounded. Everyone was calculating in their hearts. If they were in the ring right now, how many moves could they withstand? As time passed, the ring fell little by little. Xiaqing felt that something was wrong. She clenched her teeth and jumped into the air. She shook her flexible sword and slashed it down. "Ha!" Qin Shuriwei laughed. Wasn't this the move he usually used? So, he shook his flexible sword and spun it forward, wanting to entangle Xia Qing's flexible sword. Unexpectedly, just as the two soft swords were about to touch each other, an inch-long faint red light suddenly flashed from Qin Shiyue's soft sword. With a soft sound, the faint red light hit the tip of Qin Shiyue's soft sword, and the tip of the sword, which was about the length of 4 fingers, fell. Sword light. Qin Shiyue gasped and almost cried out. At this time, there were people below the ring who knew what was good for him. Suddenly, the whole ring was noisy, and everyone was amazed. Xia Qing's face was slightly proud. The inch-long sword light on her flexible sword was expanding and contracting, and a red light was moving up and down her flexible sword. On the other hand, Qin Shiyue frowned and looked a little nervous. Although Qin Shiyue was a disciple of the Tenryu sect's Garuda, Garuda was best at Qinggong. Therefore, Qin Shiyue was not as proficient in internal strength as Xia Qing. When he saw that the tip of his flexible sword had been chopped off, he knew that he might not be a match for Xia Qing in martial arts. So, he frowned and took back his flexible sword. He reached into his pocket and took out a foot-long thing that looked like an antler. The thing was shaped like an antler and was completely black. It was impossible to tell what material it was made of. Seeing this, Xia Qing didn't hold back and swung her sword again. Qin Shiyue raised his weapon to meet it while chanting. With a chi-la sound, like the sound of a torch being thrown into cold water, the inch-long sword light on Xia Qing's flexible sword immediately shrank when it touched the weapon. Xia Qing's face was full of horror, and she unconsciously took a few steps back. Qin Shiyue grinned maliciously and followed up. She waved her antlers and displayed a strange move, forcing Xia Qing to be overwhelmed. She accidentally touched it again, and the sword aura shrunk a little. As a result, the sword light on Xia Qing's flexible sword had disappeared, and Qin Shiyue became braver and braver as he fought. He stretched out his hand, and the weapon went straight for Xia Qing's throat. Xia Qing seemed to have something wrong with her heart. She covered her heart with her left hand and wanted to block the antler with the flexible sword in her right hand. However, she was afraid that the antler would break the flexible sword. She had no choice but to roll the flexible sword and stab it under the antler towards Qin Shiyue's chest. The flexible sword was very fast and seemed to have the idea of besieging Wei to save Zhao. "Go down!" Qin Shiyue shouted and threw out the antler in his hand. At this time, his antler was only about 4 inches away from Xia Qing's throat, and the flexible sword was more than a foot away from him. In any case, it was impossible for Xia Qing to stab it first. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A faint brilliance flashed out from Xia Qing's chest, and a faint light shield blocked in front of Qin Shiyue's antler. With a soft poof, the light shield blocked the antler, and the antler couldn't move an inch further. "Jade Talisman?" Qin Shiyue cried out and immediately tried to use his hand to knock the soft sword away. Who would have thought that before he could use his antlers, another sword light would appear on Xia Qing's soft sword? Although this sword light was much dimmer than before, it was still able to hit Qin Shiyue's major acupuncture point at a distance of 3 inches. Seeing that the flexible sword had succeeded, Xia Qing floated up and kicked Qin Shiyue's chest, kicking him out of the ring with a pa sound. At this time, the time limit for burning a stick of incense was up, and the ring had just fallen to the ground. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian.com to vote for recommendation and monthly. Chapter 1044. Senior Brother Qin, thank you for letting me win. Xia Qing cupped her hands and said after Qin Shiyue's acupoints were unsealed by the disciples of the Tenryu sect. "It's okay. It's okay." Qin Shiyue waved his hand and said, "I didn't expect you to have a jade talisman, so it's normal for me to lose. Hee. I also didn't expect Senior Brother Qin to have a magic tool, so I had no choice." Xia Qing didn't give in. A good man doesn't fight with a woman. Qin Shiyue curled his lips and said in his heart. He turned around and comforted Su Jiaodong. He didn't finish what he promised, so he was afraid that it would be difficult to report back. Xia Qing and Qin Shuriwei were evenly matched, so they fought for the longest time. The other three arenas had already been decided. Although Hu Bin was a disciple of the Rui Jin Palace, he was born with great strength. His crazy devil staff technique could change the wind and clouds. Although between the clouds and the water's martial arts were also very strong, he was still defeated by the staff. The battle between Yuan Tong and Liang Sangshu was the most interesting. As soon as Liang Sangshu took out his long saber and waved it a few times, Yuan Tong knew that he was no match for him. So he immediately jumped down from the arena and admitted defeat. He really had a good attitude. The battle between Wu Shanghong and between the clouds and the water's Qinyang was basically not on the same level. Qinyang was similar to Hu Bin. He was also tall and strong, and his arms were very strong. He held a bronze statue in his hand, and when the bronze statue danced, Wu Shanghong, who was holding a long sword, couldn't get close to him. Wu Shanghong wanted to use Qin Gong to fight, but Qinyang didn't give him a chance and sealed the entire arena. Wu Shanghong was helpless and was forced to jump down from the arena by the bronze statue. So far, the four disciples of the Righteous Alliance were all defeated. The sword competition of the Fragrant Religion's Wulin Assembly started in the morning, and now the sun was setting. Only 4 people were chosen. They were Xia Qing and Hu Bin from Fragrant Religion, and Liang Sangshu and Qinyang from between the clouds and the water. In the middle of Huayu Palace, a platform that was several times bigger than the previous one slowly rose up. Nun Shuizhan jumped onto the arena and said with a smile, "Everyone, after a day of exciting sword competition, we have finally chosen 4 disciples who are qualified to fight for the 3 rewards. There are still 4 more competitions left. For transparency and fairness, here are 4 jade tokens with the names of the 4 disciples written on them. Would the elder of the Dalan Temple please draw a jade token for us? The 2 that the elder draws will form a group, and the 2 of you will form a group. The 2 winners of the 2 groups will fight for the purple phoenix hairpin, and the 2 losers will fight for the 5 elements primordial stone." As she spoke, a female disciple brought a tray with 4 jade tokens on it. Nun Shuizhan casually invited the 4 people below the arena to come up and stand to the side. Then, the elder also came up. Under the gaze of the 4 people, he randomly picked 2 jade tokens and gave them to Nun Shuizhan. He didn't even look at them and jumped down from the arena. Nun Shuizhan took the jade tokens and looked at the names on them. A strange expression appeared on her face. She didn't read it and passed it to the person beside her. That person looked at it and smiled. "The elder is really fair." Then he said, "Xia Qing from the Cult of Fragrance versus Hu Bin from the Cult of Fragrance." "Ha ha!" The people below the arena laughed. "This is great. The internal battle begins." Nun Shuizhan smiled and passed the remaining jade tokens to another person. That person nodded and read, "Between the clouds and the water, Liang Sangshu versus between the clouds and the water, Qinyang." "All right," Nun Shuizhan said, "since the 2 groups of opponents have been drawn by Master Changsheng, let's continue with the sword competition." The 5 people jumped down from the arena, and Xia Qing and Hu Bin came up again. Xia Qing held a soft sword, and Hu Bin held a copper rod. The 2 looked at each other, and Hu Bin cupped his hands and said, "Although I think highly of myself, I know that I'm no match for senior sister. I admit defeat." After that, Hu Bin jumped down from the arena. Xia Qing sighed slightly and followed him down. Liang Sangshu and Qinyang didn't need to be mentioned. Qinyang didn't even say a word and directly jumped down from the arena. He was the fastest to decide the winner of the sword competition today. The result was beyond everyone's expectations. Since the 2 sects were enemies, they naturally had to send the strongest people. Between the clouds and the water questioned the Cult of Fragrance at the beginning of the sword competition, saying that they couldn't take out the blade-breaking force as a reward. Then they should focus on the blade-breaking force. The 3rd and 4th place would be competing for the blade-breaking force. Why did Qinyang admit defeat? Qinyang was indeed strong, but he was still inferior to Liang Sangshu. Wouldn't Liang Sangshu have a better chance of winning the blade-breaking force than Qinyang? Could it be that the imitation purple phoenix hairpin was more useful than the blade-breaking force? That's what most people thought. At this time, Nun Shuezhen, who had just jumped down from the arena, jumped back into the arena again and said with a smile, "I didn't expect the winner to be decided so quickly." Then, the next battle will be for the third place of the sword competition. Whoever wins the sword competition will get the blade-breaking force. As she spoke, she waved the blade-breaking force in her hand and turned around to stand at the edge of the arena. When Hu Bin and Qin Yang stood on the arena, Chun Yang's words made everyone understand what between the clouds and the water was planning. Qin Yang cupped his hands and said, "Senior brother Hu, I didn't have enough fun in the battle just now. I think senior brother Hu didn't have enough fun either, right?" Hu Bin was stunned and said, "That's right. Junior brother Chun, what do you mean?" "Haha, it's nothing. I just want to add one more rule to the arena. I don't know if senior brother Hu is willing to accept it. Tell me about it." Hu Bin was not fooled. "It's simple. The time in the arena is short, the task is heavy, and we can't kill people. It's really difficult. Since senior brother Hu is good at physical strength, why don't we compete in physical strength? We can't dodge from the first move until one of us is knocked out of the arena. If one of us dodges the first move, then he loses the battle. What do you think?" Everyone under the arena suddenly understood. Although Hu Bin's martial arts were not as good as Liang Cangshu's, his physical strength was much greater than Liang Cangshu's. His copper rod was also a very powerful weapon. Although Liang Cangshu's saber had the blade chi, he was not sure if he could avoid killing people in the time it took to burn an incense stick. When Hu Bin heard this, he laughed proudly. "Huh, good. Except for a junior brother who used his strength to subdue me, I have never met anyone who is stronger than me. Junior brother Chun, what you said is very good. Let's do it." As he spoke, he swung his copper rod. The terrifying whistling sound swept towards Chun Yang's body. Qin Yang silently circulated his internal strength. His mind was clear, and the copper man in his hand swayed. With a dong sound, the two heavy weapons collided. The sound was so loud that it deafened everyone's ears. However, this was just the beginning. Next, it was like forging iron in a blacksmith shop. The dong-dong sound was endless. The two people collided with each other. "Ha, good." Hu Bin laughed. "This is a real battle. Really, come. Take another 300 moves from me. Who's afraid of you?" Another sound of forging iron below the stage. The crowd watched the exciting battle between the two of them without blinking. However, they covered their ears with their hands. Some of the more powerful ones even sealed their own acupoints so that they did not need to listen to any sounds. 30 minutes passed quickly. Under the two people's unreserved strength, the winner was gradually decided. Just as between the clouds and the water had predicted, Hu Bin's strength was still a bit weaker than Chun Yang's. If he didn't fall into the trap between the clouds and the water and use the crazy demon rod technique, he might have a chance to win. However, now, Hu Bin's arms were numb, and he couldn't even hold the copper rod. "Hu Bin, take another move from me." Yangshan also saw this. He shouted loudly, gathered all the strength in his body, and swung the bronze statue towards Hu Bin's copper rod. With a dong sound, Hu Bin couldn't hold the rod anymore. The copper rod flew out and flew towards the entrance of Huayu Palace. "Ha ha!" Qin Yang, who had won, was very happy. He raised his head and laughed. "I haven't had such a good fight in a long time. Who else wants to come?" This guy thought he was going to challenge him. Before Hu Bin could speak, a voice came from the entrance of Huayu Palace. "You brat, who are you? Let this Xiaoxia see your strength." Who is this? Everyone in the arena was shocked. That guy was just joking when he was having a good time. Who would really go up and challenge him? When they looked up, they saw a man and a woman walking in front of Huayu Palace. The woman was shy and followed the man. The man was tall and thin, with a baby face, small eyes, and a flat nose. He was still holding the copper rod that Hu Bin was knocked away by Qin Yang. If the man wasn't Zhang Xiaohua and the woman wasn't Meng, who else could it be? On the high platform, Garuda, who was bored to death, watched the events unfold in front of him expressionlessly. However, when he saw Meng's face, he was so shocked that his eyeballs almost fell to the ground. With a shout, he stood up and was about to use the levitation technique to fly over, but he was stopped by Nun Jingyi. Garuda, Heavenly King? Did you see someone familiar? Garuda was stunned and looked back at Nun Jingyi. His eyes narrowed, and he sneered, Jing-yi, how dare you? You don't know who she is? I know. She's an inner disciple of the Aroma sect. Her name is Zixia. Zixia. Garuda was surprised. He looked back at Meng several times and shook his head. This is the saintess of the Tenryu sect. How can she be an inner disciple of the Aroma sect? Saintess? Bai Yanqiu exclaimed. She was also puzzled when she saw Zhang Xiaohua and Meng, but she didn't care too much. Even if Zhang Xiaohua told Nun Jingyi about this, Bai Yanqiu knew that Nun Jingyi wouldn't do anything to her. After all, this happened before she came to the Aroma sect. She wasn't just saying that she would let bygones be bygones. But Bai Yanqiu didn't expect that the Mo Xin Gong disciple she didn't want to meet was actually related to the Tenryu sect. And she was the saintess. Then this was really troublesome. Chapter 1045. Bai Yanqiu's heart was in a mess. He regretted that he didn't meet this disciple of Mo Sun Gong. Zhang Xiaohua walked to the side of the ring with the copper rod in her hand. She got on the ring in a flash. She cupped her hands and said with a smile, Senior brother, you must be a disciple of Between the Clouds and the Water. I came back late this time and heard your challenge. My hands are itching. I want to take this opportunity to exchange pointers with you. What do you think? Oh, right. I haven't asked your name yet. After Zhang Xiaohua finished his words, Qin Yang regretted it just like his Bai Zhangmin. He didn't have any reason to boast. Now, he really got the disciple. Although this disciple didn't look good, was very young, and might not be good at martial arts, but this was a mistake. He had completed the task given to him by the head. He only needed to slap his butt and jump off the ring. Why'd he talk so much? However, Qin Yang had already thought about it. He cupped his hands and said, Junior brother, I am Qin Yang of Between the Clouds and the Water. I haven't asked your name yet. Zhang Xiaohua curled her lips and said, Senior brother Chun, haven't you seen me before? Qin Yang frowned and looked around. He shook his head and said, Forgive me, but I haven't seen you before. Well, if you haven't seen me before, then so be it. I am Ren Xiaoyao, a disciple of the protector of the incense cult. Zhang Xiaohua's words surprised the people below the ring. These people were, of course, Qin Shiriyue and Su Jiaodong. Qin Shiriyue had just been defeated in the arena. She did not complete the task that Su Jiaodong had assigned to her. She only lost because of her carelessness. She did not know how many humiliating conditions she had agreed to, but she did not manage to make Su Jiaodong happy. Just as she was feeling depressed, she saw Hu Bin's copper rod being knocked away. Zhang Xiaohua entered the arena. When she saw Zhang Xiaohua's familiar face, she did not care what she was thinking. She immediately shouted, Jiao, look! This was a way to divert attention. In fact, he might not remember Zhang Xiaohua, a child from 5 years ago. However, Su Jiaodong had some impression of Zhang Xiaohua. Not to mention the old man pushing the cart that day, which made her feel ashamed. Zhang Xiaohua risked her life to save Qin Shiriyue, which gave her the opportunity to be with Qin Shiriyue. This made her feel grateful. Later, although she felt a little guilty that Zhang Xiaohua was buried in the fish's belly, 5 years were enough for her to forget this inconspicuous person. Now, at best, Zhang Xiaohua was the real Xiaohua who served as a foil to the romance between Su Jiaodong and Qin Shiriyue when they first met. However, although Xiaohua was Xiaohua, the scene when Su Jiaodong and Qin Shiriyue first met was engraved in her mind. When Su Jiaodong saw Zhang Xiaohua for the first time, she couldn't help but blurt out, Hey, isn't this the one who was buried in the fish's belly? Ren Xiaoyao? We really do know each other. Qin Shiriyue wasn't surprised. She took a closer look and shook her head. It looks very similar. It's exactly the same as it was 5 years ago. But, Jiao, You're a lot more plump than you were 5 years ago. Rin Xiaoyao was a child. He's already become another person. How could it be him? As she said that, her eyes stared at Su Jiaodong's chest with a lustful look. Su Jiaodong was stunned for a moment, but she immediately understood. She nodded and said, "Yes, I only remembered it because I had a deep impression of you when I met you. You're right." Then, she rolled her eyes at her and said, "I'm so plump. Isn't it all because of you?" Hee hee, you still have to work harder. Qin Shuriwa saw that she had successfully changed the topic. She was secretly pleased and actually started to tease Su Jiaodong. The two of them didn't say much when Zhang Xiaohua's self-introduction fell into their ears. It's really Ren Xiaoyao? This, how is this possible? Qin Shuriwa and Su Jiaodong's faces were filled with disbelief. They threw away the gradually rising wetness in their hearts and turned to look at the arena. In the arena, Qin Yang was even more shocked. He secretly said, "Ren Xiaoyao? Is this name so common that I need to know him?" However, he smiled and said, "Junior brother Ren came late and didn't participate in the sword competition arena. It's really a pity that he couldn't show his martial arts. I also wanted to compare notes with junior brother Ren, but this arena has already ended. I have the heart, but not the strength. Ha ha." Zhang Xiaohua laughed. He had a lot of opinions about between the clouds and the water. If it was someone else in the arena, even if they shouted until the sky was broken, he wouldn't care. It had nothing to do with him. But this, between the clouds and the water, who let him hear it? He deserved to be unlucky. Could it be? Senior Brother Chen's words just now were just farts? Zhang Xiaohua's words were really hurtful, but also made the people below the arena happy. Yes, what did they come here for? Wasn't it just to watch the show? Between the clouds and the water was a sect that had just shown its face. Unexpectedly, it was able to sit on the high platform. Moreover, it had taken up 2 of the final 4 spots. Any sect that didn't know the ins and outs of the sect would murmur in their hearts. Now that there was someone, and it was a disciple of the fragrant religion who stood out to cause trouble, wouldn't it be exactly what they wanted? Ha ha! The people below the arena were convulsing with laughter. Only the sects that were related to between the clouds and the water didn't dare to laugh. But sometimes they couldn't help but laugh. It was really uncomfortable to watch. Junior brother Ren, Qin Yang was furious. He slammed the bronze statue on the stage and scolded, "I respect you as a disciple of the fragrant religion. You are also young, so I don't mind you coming on stage. But why are you speaking so rudely?" Ha ha! Zhang Xiaohua laughed and pointed her finger outside. Senior Brother Chen's words are funny. You can ask the people below. Who didn't hear it? I am you the one who invited me to come on stage. Why did I come on stage? If you don't dare to accept the challenge, then your words just now are farts. Farts! Zhang Xiaohua's words, one word at a time, were sonorous, and in the end, she used the word farts to end it. The people below the arena were very happy. They all shouted, "Yes, yes, we can all testify." Qin Yang didn't expect this result. He was very embarrassed. If it was any other time, he would have already challenged her. But in this arena, he couldn't make the decision without permission. He unconsciously turned to look at Bai Yinxiu, who had a complicated expression on his face. Bai Yinxiu was thinking about the karma of the dream. He didn't have time to think about how Zhang Xiaohua and the dream were able to escape between the clouds and the water. At this time, he saw that things were getting out of hand. He couldn't help but look at Nanjing Yi and sneered. I thought the fragrant religion, as an immortal sect, would have strict rules and their disciples would know the big picture. How come this protector disciple doesn't know etiquette? Today, my eyes have been opened. Ha ha! Nanjing Yi laughed instead of being angry. By Zhangmin, these words are very interesting. This is exactly what I wanted to say to you. It seems Bai Zhangmin also doesn't know etiquette. Nanjing Yi, why do you say this? Bai Yinxiu became angry. Is the fragrant religion bullying us between the clouds and the water? I won't talk to you about this. Let the elder explain it to you. Nanjing Yi snorted disdainfully. The elder nodded. Nanjing Yi's words are reasonable. By Zhang Min, the sword competition of the 5 sects has always had rules. For 2 disciples who haven't met, if one of them loses to a 3rd disciple, and the 3rd disciple wins against the other disciple, then the disciple can take out his prize and challenge the other disciple. Moreover, the other disciples can also challenge the other disciples who have won in the arena. However, the challenger must take out something of equal value to the prize of the disciple he challenged. Of course, this rule was created by the 5 sects to encourage the other sects to exchange ideas. It hasn't been used for a long time. Moreover, there are too many sects participating in the sword competition today. This is a special case. This old monk didn't expect that someone would take out such a valuable prize to challenge someone. Hearing this, Bai Yinqiu shook her head and said, "Elder, I already understand what you said, but Chen Yang was the winner of the arena, and he didn't want to challenge someone of a higher rank. Ren Xiaoyao didn't win against other disciples?" The elder laughed. "The rules are set like this, but there are a lot of accidents outside the rules. We're too lazy to make the details. In the past, it was always the disciples who exchanged pointers, and they were always tormented. Moreover, this old monk has really encountered a situation like today. How about it? You don't have to believe the words of this sect, but what about the elder?" "None, Jing," he sneered. "Moreover, the matter that the elder mentioned, even Garuda knows about it. Jing, how many years has it been? How can you still remember it?" Garuda laughed. "That's right, it's this heavenly king. That day, Jing, he got a treasure. This heavenly king coveted it and went to the arena to take it." "What about it?" "That's still, where did it happen?" "Sai, that was the last time we had a sword competition." "How many years has it been? Now that I think about it, it seems like yesterday. Unfortunately, I'm already separated from senior sister Jing by life and death." "What? Jing is no longer here?" Garuda said curiously. "She's not old enough?" I know. She must be too competitive and has gone mad." Nanjing looked at Garuda, as if trying to figure out the meaning of his words. Bai Yinqiu frowned. "Nanjing, do you mean that my disciple must accept this challenge?" Nanjing came back to her senses and said, "No need. It's fine as long as he says no." Then she added, "As long as you give up your face between the clouds and the water, it's fine." This isn't it the same as not saying anything? Bai Yinqiu's nose was almost crooked from anger. Bai Yinqiu thought for a moment and said, "This is the first time I've met between the clouds and the water. Let me think about it." "No problem. Anyway, even if it's a challenge, your disciple has just had a fight. It's impossible for her to continue now." Nanjing was secretly pleased. She ordered her disciples to call Zhang Xiaohua and Chen Yang down from the arena. "Please vote monthly. Please vote recommendation. Please collect. Please tip. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qitian. Come to vote." Chapter 1046. Zhang Xiaohua, Meng, and Chen Yang came to the high platform. Chen Yang walked to Bai Yinqiu with a long face. He sincerely admitted that he had learned the serious consequences of careless talk today. Then he stood with his hands down and quietly waited for the consequences. Jing Yinan smiled and asked in a gentle voice, "Zixia, Ren Xiaoyao, why did you come back so late? Why did you come back to Huayu Peak when you saw that the distinguished guests of the Dalan Temple had arrived and the martial arts convention was about to end?" Zhang Xiaohua looked at Meng and then squinted at Bai Yinqiu. She said, "After I came out of the Dalan Temple with senior sister Zixia, I saw that it was still early, so I took the opportunity to deal with some personal matters. But just as this disciple was about to return to the incense cult, I ran into this sect leader by subordinates, who insisted on inviting this disciple to the Water Cloud sect. This disciple wanted to report back to the sect leader, but dozens of disciples from the Water Cloud sect had invited this disciple, so this disciple had no choice but to go. Jing Yinan finally understood why Zhang Xiaohua, who usually looked very gentle, was so aggressive as soon as she entered the Huayu Palace. She could not help but sneer at Bai Yinqiu and said, "By Zhang Min, since you invited the protectors of your sect, you should be courteous and sincere." I'm afraid it's inappropriate to invite dozens of people. Bai Yinxiu said with a smile. It's precisely because I wanted to be courteous and sincere that I used dozens of people. Only the fragrant religion can have this kind of face. Zhang Xiaohua said again, the water island between the clouds and the water is really good, but the route is complicated. Brother Liang used a carriage and a black cloth to bring me and Zixia between the clouds and the water. Hee, it must have been hard on you. Rin Xiaoyao, you actually managed to walk out on your own. Abbess Jingyi laughed. That's right. I don't know what Bai Zhangmin is thinking. He came to Huayu Peak to participate in the martial arts circle convention and left his disciple and dream between the clouds and the water behind. Zhang Xiaohua bared her teeth and said. Bai Yinxiu threw caution to the wind and said with a smile, I invited Rin Xiaoyao to come over because I wanted to ask about the fragrant cult and when the martial arts convention would be held. But when I heard that time was tight, I hurried over. Then he instructed his disciples to treat Rin Xiaoyao and Zixia with respect. Then he sent people to escort the two disciples back to the incense religion slowly and carefully. But I don't know what Rin Xiaoxiao would say that I left the two of you between the clouds and the water. Could it be that something went wrong? Is there a misunderstanding? Seeing Bai Yinxiu keep making excuses, Zhang Xiaohua already knew what was going on. She only smiled and said, well, Bai Zhangmin is right. Bai Zhangmin might have instructed Senior Brother Peng, but he might have other important things to do. After sending us out of between the clouds and the water, he immediately went to do other things. Peng Yiyu? Bai Yinxiu was stunned. What? Didn't Bai Zhangmin instruct Senior Brother Peng? Zhang Xiaohua looked at Bai Yinxiu with a faint smile. Oh no, I instructed him. These words seemed to be said to Zhang Xiaohua, but in fact, Bai Yinxiu wanted Garuda to hear it. That's right, it was Garuda. When Meng went up to the high platform from outside, Garuda's eyes were fixed on Meng. He did not seem to care about Bai Yinxiu's explanation. Meng already knew about her background. Looking at the 5 people sitting on the high platform, and then at Garuda's position, she already knew who this person was. But when she thought about her mother's situation, she unconsciously turned a blind eye to Garuda's gaze. On the high platform, where the sect leaders were, there was a restriction that blocked off their voices. The people outside could not hear what they were saying. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was about to report to Nanjing, the last round of the Martial Arts Society convention had already begun on the arena outside. The last match was naturally between Xia Qing from the School of Fragrance and Liang Sangshu from between the clouds and the water. Peacock had already told Xia Qing about Liang Sangshu's strength when she saw that it was Xia Qing's turn. But when she was done, she realized, was there really a need for that? Sure enough, when Zhang Xiaohua and Chen Yang left the arena, Nun Xuezhen announced the start of the last match. Xia Qing held a soft sword in her hand, and Liang Sangshu also held a long saber. They both leaped into the arena. But after they introduced themselves, Xia Qing smiled and said, Brother Liang between the clouds and the water is a guest from afar. Our sect leader has instructed. Before she could finish, Liang Sangshu suddenly realized that something was wrong. He immediately exerted force on his feet and tried to jump off the stage. Unfortunately, what he thought was exactly what Xia Qing had predicted. Moreover, between the clouds and the water's lightness skill was obviously inferior to that of the School of Fragrance. When Liang Sangshu's figure was still in midair, Xia Qing had already landed on the ground and added, Our sect leader has instructed that in this last match, you can only lose, not win. You. Liang Sangshu was furious. Since you're not allowed to win, why did you still participate in this match? Who doesn't know that you won the 5-element stone? If I had known, I would have thrown away my pride and jumped off the stage without waiting for you to say anything. In fact, Liang Sangshu had thought of this, but Qinyang had just been humiliated by Zhang Xiaohua. Even if he tried to cover it up, between the clouds and the water had already lost face. He didn't dare to make trouble for Bai Yinxiu again and again. So he thought of using a trick during the sword competition and pretending to be kicked off the stage by Xia Qing. Who knew? Xia Qing would do anything to get the 5-element stone. Well, Right now, Xiaqing was only a disciple of the distant fire temple and had nothing to do with Mo Xiangong. It wouldn't be a disgrace to the school of fragrance. Most likely, Nanjing had thought of this a long time ago. Needless to say, the disciples of the various sects in Huayu Palace, even Nun Shuizhen, was caught off guard by the change in the arena. She only came to her senses after Xiaqing admitted defeat. With a bitter smile, she shouted, "According to the rules of the sword competition, the one who falls to the ground first is the loser. Therefore, Liang Cangshu between the clouds and the water is the winner. He has won the prize of this martial arts competition, the imitation purple phoenix hairpin." Huh! The whole arena roared with laughter, followed by a burst of clapping sounds. It was unknown whether it was praise or ridicule. Liang Cangshu was quite helpless, but he still went up the stage and took the imitation purple phoenix hairpin from Nun Shuizhen's hands. This thing, alas, for sects other than the 5 great sects, it might be a treasure, but now that the way of immortality had been annihilated, between the clouds and the water was the inheritance of the Shindao sect. What kind of broken magic tools did they not have? They even had quite a few complete magic tools. So who would be lacking in this? In contrast to Liang Cangshu's bitter smile, Xiaqing's smile was as beautiful as a flower. It was impossible to tell that she was the loser of a battle. Abbess Shuizhen was also smiling at this time. She handed the jade box with 5 primordial stones in it to Xiaqing and said, "Congratulations, disciple Xiaqing from the Fire Palace. I hope you will continue to work hard in the future and make further progress to become the champion of the Sword Conference." "Thank you, Nun Shuizhen." Xiaqing could not suppress the smile on her face. Seeing the two of them like this, even an idiot could tell that the value of the 2 items were different. Everyone in the arena was a little curious about why Nun Jingyi made such an arrangement. Then they looked at the high platform where Nun Jingyi and the others were standing. They wanted to see how the protector who suddenly appeared would deal with Qin Yang. Of course, Qin Shuriwei and Su Jiaodong were also looking forward to it. They also wanted to know if this Ren Xiaoyao was the Ren Xiaoyao they knew. However, after some discussion, they agreed that this was just a coincidence. It was impossible for a young man to grow from a person with poor martial arts to one of the top masters in Jianghu in 5 years. Nun Jingyi looked at the farce on the stage and laughed in her heart. She looked at the unhappy Bai Yinxiu and sneered. She turned to Master Changsheng and said, "Master, according to the previous rules, we have decided to provide Ren Xiaoyao with a manual of the same value as the blade-breaking force. He will have a sword competition with the disciples of Between the Clouds and the Water. What do you think?" Master Changsheng nodded and said, "Of course, but I wonder if Bai Zhongmin is willing to accept." When Bai Yinxiu heard this, he was moved. He looked at Ren Xiaoyao, then at Qin Yang. He thought about Zhang Xiaohua's performance Between the Clouds and the Water and said, "That's great. Since I'm participating in the sword competition of the 5 sects Between the Clouds and the Water, I naturally have to follow the original rules of the 5 sections. But I have a request. Please speak, Bai Zhongmin." Master Changsheng said with a smile. "That is, there is no time limit for this competition. What do you think?" "What do you think, Nun Jingyi?" Master Changsheng asked. "Of course," Nun Jingyi said without hesitation. Seeing Nun Jingyi's quick response, Bai Yinxiu felt that he had been tricked. However, when he thought about it carefully, there was nothing he could think of. Would Master Changsheng be the supervisor of this competition? Bai Yinxiu stood up and said. Master Changsheng nodded and said, "This matter involves the incense cult and Between the Clouds and the Water. So, of course, I have to be the supervisor." Below the arena, the crowd saw that the host of the Dalan Temple had come to the arena in person, and they were all interested. Nun Shuizhen walked to the front and told the whole story. In the end, she took out a small booklet and said, "This is my incense cult's martial art like water. It is also a martial art, but it is more for women. Now I give it to my sect's disciple, Ren Xiaoyao. If he loses this competition, this like water will belong to Chunyang Between the Clouds and the Water. If he wins, Then Chun Yang's blade-breaking force will belong to my sex disciple, Rin Xiaoyao. Great! The crowd shouted. They realized that this was the climax of the martial arts circle convention. However, they were all whispering. Rin Xiaoyao was so young. How could his martial arts be comparable to Chun Yang's? However, when Rin Xiaoyao and Chun Yang went to the arena again, they saw Zhang Xiaohua holding the wrought copper staff. She looked like she knew everything. Everyone had a feeling that this young disciple was not as simple as he looked. Sure enough, Zhang Xiaohua waved the wrought copper staff and shouted to the crowd, "Senior brother, lend me your wrought copper staff." The people who had just regained their confidence in Zhang Xiaohua were immediately discouraged. This weapon, could anyone borrow it? Chapter 1047. Hu Bin was also amused and said, take it. Smash this guy until his peach blossoms bloom. Well, if you win, I will give you this cudgel." Everyone laughed out loud. Zhang Xiaohua weighed the copper cudgel in her hand and said to Chun Yang, "This cudgel is really light. I have no choice. I can't find a suitable one in a short time. I will just have to make do with this for now." As she spoke, she waved the cudgel, which seemed a little jerky. Damn, seeing Zhang Xiaohua like this, Chun Yang's eyes were almost burning with anger. He had been scared for a long time and was on tenterhooks when Bai Yinxiu gave him a good face. How come this guy's cudgel was not used at all? Since junior brother Ren wants to fight with me, then I have no choice. I'm older, so I don't dare to take the lead. Please make your move, junior brother Ren. Chun Yang said politely. Well said. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and looked at the elder next to her. I have just learned a new cudgel technique and was looking for someone to test it out. After she finished speaking, she waved her copper cudgel and displayed the Tongtian cudgel technique. This move seems to be the Luohan cudgel? No, Tongtian cudgel technique. The elder's eyes were so sharp that he could see the problem with Zhang Xiaohua's cudgel technique at a glance. However, after 2 moves, he found something wrong again. This is not right. Why is it so different from the moves of the Luohan cudgel? It seems to be more like the Twin Dragon cudgel technique. This young benefactor Ren has learned so many things. The elder was confused and stared at the competition. Chun Yang's heart was also in turmoil. Since Zhang Xiaohua's first cudgel, Chun Yang had been trying his best to deal with her. He intended to knock Zhang Xiaohua out of the arena to make up for his slip of the tongue. However, the first 10 moves of Zhang Xiaohua's cudgel technique were still obscure and full of flaws. There were also a lot of problems in the connection between the moves. Chun Yang hit her with the copper cudgel several times, forcing Zhang Xiaohua to stop her moves and resist with her strength. To Chun Yang's surprise, Zhang Xiaohua's strength seemed to be no less than his. Every time their weapons collided, there would be a loud sound, which was even louder than the competition between him and Hu Bin. However, after every collision with him, Zhang Xiaohua tried to pick up her broken moves again. After dozens of moves like this, Chun Yang gradually felt that something was wrong, because Zhang Xiaohua's moves were becoming more and more skillful. The cudgel was like Zhang Xiaohua's extended arm, which was natural and easy to control. And the cudgel technique displayed by Zhang Xiaohua became more and more mysterious. Not only were there no flaws, but the moves were also as smooth as flowing water. The overwhelming cudgel waves hit Chun Yang from all directions, making him feel breathless. With a loud bang, Zhang Xiaohua's cudgel hit Chun Yang's copper cudgel. She laughed and said, "Cool. Such cudgel technique only exists in heaven." Then she shouted again, "Chun Yang, watch my moves." After that, she turned her head, and a creaking sound came from her neck. She raised the cudgel high and waved it, like a rolling yellow dragon, rolling and smashing towards Chun Yang's face. Seeing this, Chun Yang suddenly felt that something was wrong. He saw a flaw in Zhang Xiaohua's moves, so he raised his copper cudgel and pushed it. "That's why I asked you to come." Zhang Xiaohua laughed and hit the copper cudgel. Chun Yang's hand was a bit numb. Before Chun Yang could change his move, Zhang Xiaohua waved her cudgel again. With a whoosh, the cudgel hit Chun Yang's left shoulder. Chen Yang had no choice but to raise his copper cudgel to block it. Since Zhang Xiaohua had taken the initiative, why would she be polite? Chen Yang was being hit by Zhang Xiaohua's copper rod from head to toe. Cracking noises were almost audible. Chen Yang was hit by Zhang Xiaohua's copper rod from head to toe. Poor Chen Yang, it was the opposite. Just now, he was chasing after Zhang Xiaohua's flaws and wanted to compete with Zhang Xiaohua in strength. Now, every time Zhang Xiaohua hit the copper cudgel, her strength increased a bit. After a dozen hits, Chen Yang couldn't stand it anymore. He really couldn't understand how this thin and weak young man could have so much strength in his arms. His arms were even bigger than Hubin's. Moreover, the strength was increasing little by little, and there was no end to it. Zhang Xiaohua became more and more excited. He had always used prajna and had never used cudgel techniques. Today, when he used it, he felt that this cudgel was a weapon that a real man should use. It was his strong suit to win with strength. You brute, if you can block this move, I, Xiaoxia, will immediately jump out of the arena. Zhang Xiaohua shouted heroically. He raised his cudgel to the sky and smashed it toward Chen Yang's face. It was the heaven-shocking cudgel move that he had learned long ago. Yang Chun was also emboldened by his words. However, when he saw the cudgel that seemed to fill up the sky and earth, his momentum was already weak. He wanted to dodge, but the cudgel seemed to have locked onto him. No matter how he moved, the copper cudgel kept hitting him bit by bit. Good. Chen Yang made up his mind. He waved his copper cudgel, gathered all his strength, and faced the cudgel head-on. First, there was a loud bang, which was louder than the countless sounds that people had heard before. Chen Yang felt pain in his hands, and his arms were numb. He loosened his grip, and the copper cudgel was knocked away. At the same time, there was a cracking sound. When people saw that the cudgel, which was as thick as a goose egg, was bent by Zhang Xiaohua, not only Chen Yang was dumbfounded, but everyone in the square was dumbfounded except for Hubin. No one expected that this ordinary-looking young man would have such great strength in his arms that he could knock away Chun Yang's copper cudgel. Perhaps no one had heard of Chen Yang yesterday, but today he was already famous. However, in just a few moments, he was trampled under Zhang Xiaohua's feet. Different from other people's amazement, Master Changsheng, Master Changxing, and Great Master Changgung had known that Zhang Xiaohua was so strong that even the guardian disciples of the Dalan Temple were not as strong as him. They had expected this result. What surprised them was the cudgel technique used by Zhang Xiaohua. At first glance, this cudgel technique was similar to the Luohan cudgel, but after looking at it again, it was different. It also had the shadow of the Tong Tian cudgel technique. However, in the end, they did not see the complete Tong Tian cudgel technique. Is Ren Xiaoyao using the Tong Tian cudgel technique? Or is it something else? This was the common doubt in the hearts of the three masters. Well, this sword competition is over. I declare that the guardian disciple of the cult of fragrance, Ren Xiaoyao, is the winner. With Master Changxing's announcement, the whole square was boiling. Some of the dissatisfaction in their hearts had disappeared. The sword competition, just now, was a perfect combination of strength and moves, which was really pleasing to their eyes. Different from the excitement of the people below the stage, Chen Yang was extremely regretful. He reluctantly handed the blade-breaking force to Master Changsheng. Master Changsheng turned around and said with a smile, "Young benefactor Ren, last time at the Dalan Temple, I only heard junior brother Chongqing talk about your elegant demeanor. Now that I have finally seen it, it is really amazing. You are indeed worthy of being the Xiaoxia of this generation." Zhang Xiaohua laughed out loud and said, "If others said so, I could still be proud for a while. However, how can these things be seen in Master Changxing's eyes? Just now, I heard from senior sister Mo Zhangong that the Dalan Temple only sent disciples with the surname Yuan. Senior brother Kongshan and senior brother Kongju did not go on stage. If they came, how could I have the chance to show off? Master Changxing's praise is mocking me." Master Changxing laughed and handed the blade-breaking force to Rinpoche. He said, "This is the reward for this sword competition. Take it. This secret manual is a classic of martial arts. I have read it before. It is especially suitable for people like you who are good at external martial arts. If you have the opportunity, you may really set foot on the path of immortality." Zhang Xiaohua felt warm in his heart. He took it with his hands and bowed. "Thank you for your guidance, Master Changsheng." Yes, although the Dalan Temple and the Incense sect were two different sects, and there was some estrangement between the two sects, both Master Changsheng and the nameless old monk of the Sutra Depository Pavilion cared for him with the attitude of an elder. They even gave him some guidance. Perhaps these guidance might not be useful to Zhang Xiaohua, but Zhang Xiaohua enjoyed this kind of care very much. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua displayed the newly learned heaven-reaching staff technique in the arena. On one hand, it was to practice, and on the other hand, it was of course to return the favor of the Dalan Temple. Sure enough, the elder asked, "I still have a question to ask young benefactor Ren." "Please go ahead, master." Zhang Xiaohua replied with a smile. "The staff technique that young benefactor Ren displayed just now, is it the secret manual that I read in the Dalan Temple?" Zhang Xiaohua asked, "What do you think? It seems to be the same, but not the same." "It seems to be a mixture of many staff techniques." Zhang Xiaohua said again, "I heard the great Master Changgung say that the world's martial arts originated from the Dalan Temple. This staff technique should be the same, right? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If Master Changsheng can understand it, then it is naturally the staff technique of the Dalan Temple." Zhang Xiaohua did not directly mention the heaven-reaching staff technique, but Master Changsheng did not ask again. He was slightly stunned and said meaningfully, "Young benefactor Ren, you have a deep affinity with Buddhism. If there is a chance in the future, I would like to invite you to the Dalan Temple for a chat." "Go to the Dalan Temple?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She thought of the lotus platform, bamboo, and wind beads that she had taken directly from the Dalan Temple. She immediately wanted to shake her head like a rattle drum, but then she changed her mind and said, "I would like to thank Master Changsheng. If there is a chance in the future, I will definitely go." As for when there would be a chance, that was up to Zhang Xiaohua. Master Changsheng smiled and did not say anything else. He returned to the platform first, followed by Zhang Xiaohua. At this time, Meng had already seen Zhang Xiaohua's power and secretly gave her a thumbs up. Zhang Xiaohua smiled knowingly, but this made Garuda frown slightly. On the platform, Zhang Xiaohua took out the sword-breaking force and, like water, and handed them to Abbess Jingyi. She said, "Disciple did not disappoint you. These two secret manuals." Chapter 1048. Zhang Xiaohua defeated Qinyang and took back the sword-breaking force, which certainly affected Nun Jingyi's plan. However, seeing Zhang Xiaohua increase the prestige of the fragrance cult in the arena and kill the arrogant man between the clouds and the water, Nun Jingyi was overjoyed. Although the fragrance cult didn't have many secret skills like the sword-breaking force, and like water, they still had a lot of them. Even Xia Qing, who wasn't a disciple of the inheritance cult, could get such skills as long as her martial arts reached a certain level. Moreover, the sword-breaking force was suitable for men. How could Nun Jingyi take it seriously? Nun Jingyi waved her hand and said, "I was waiting for you to reach a higher level of martial arts before I gave you this skill. Since you took it today, you can keep it for yourself." Then she looked at the like water and smiled. "Since I gave it to you, it's yours. But don't spread it to others." Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. A few days ago, she had promised Zhang Xiaohu to find a skill for Chang'e and Qinshun. Now it was delivered directly to her. The Misty Hall was a part of the fragrance cult, so she couldn't spread it to others. "Thank you, Your Excellency." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and put it away. Nun Jingyi smiled and looked at Bai Yanxiu, whose face was livid. She waved her hand and cast a spell to remove the restriction on the high platform. Then the high platform gradually moved forward. At the same time, The arena in the Huayu Palace gradually shrank into the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, the sword competition of the Wulin Convention is over. After many rounds of competition, the top scorer, second scorer, and third scorer have been decided. They have all been rewarded. Of course, this is just a simple game. What makes me the happiest is that I can see the growth of the new generation of heroes in Jianghu through this sword competition. In the future, the entire Jianghu will prosper in your hands. The cultivation of martial arts will rise to a new height. Nanjing, he turned to look at by Yanxiu and said to the crowd, "This Wulin Convention is not only a ceremony for our fragrance cult to re-enter Jianghu, but also a starting point for Between the Clouds and the Water to enter Jianghu. I hope that in the future, Between the Clouds and the Water can become a big family in Jianghu. I hope that in the future, Between the Clouds and the Water can become a big family of Jianghu and take on the responsibility of a big sect." Everyone clapped their hands, and Bai Yanxiu smiled. He stood up and cupped his hands and said, "Between the Clouds and the Water is a new sect in Jianghu, is a new sect in the Jianghu. I hope that we can establish a good relationship with the other sects in Jianghu and make an effort Jianghu prosper. I hope that we can make Jianghu prosperous together. And I hope that in the future, Between the Clouds and the Water can receive guidance from the other sects in Jianghu so that we can do better and become stronger." Good. Some of the sects that were related to Between the Clouds and the Water began to praise them wholeheartedly. Bai Yanxiu continued, "There is one more thing that I need to explain to everyone in Jianghu. Between the Clouds and the Water is the legacy of the Shindao sect. Although we have now appeared in Jianghu with a brand new face, Between the Clouds and the Water will accept everything related to the Shindao sect." When Nanjing heard this, she couldn't help but smile and said, "Bai Zhangmin said it very well. Between the Clouds and the Water has been reborn from the ashes, and it is time to create a new world." Once again, Fragrance Cult wishes that Between the Clouds and the Water can develop smoothly and reach the heights that the Shundao sect reached in the past. "Thank you, Nun," Bai Yanxiu said with a smile. Then, Nanjing, he continued, "The Jianghu is currently in a period of change, and it needs a brand new sect like Between the Clouds and the Water to enter the Jianghu. I am pleased to announce that Fragrance Cult will be returning to Jianghu. While Between the Clouds and the Water is returning to Jianghu, I also want to tell everyone something." Nanjing, he paused for a moment, then raised her voice and said, "That is, Misty School will also be returning to Jianghu." When Alliance Master Zhang San heard this, he almost couldn't believe his ears. He stood up and said, "Nanjing, is what you said true?" At the same time, the entire Huayu Palace was in an uproar. Everyone was talking at once, filling the entire palace. How is this possible? Zhang Xiaohua was also dumbfounded. He never thought that Misty School would also be returning to Jianghu. Moreover, it was under Nanjing Yi's control that he returned to the pugilistic world. "Everyone quiet down," Nanjing Yi said sternly. Gradually, the voices in the palace quieted down. Zhang Xin stood up and felt that something was wrong. He could only stand aside and laugh coldly. What is Fragrance Cult doing? Misty School has already been destroyed. How can it return to Jianghu? Nanjing Yi laughed. "Alliance Master Zhang San, what are you saying? Shindao sect has already been destroyed for thousands of years. Isn't it returning to Jianghu now? Misty School has only been destroyed for 4 or 5 years. Why can't it return to Jianghu? If we do, as Alliance Master Zhang San said, Between the Clouds and the Water, won't it be able to return to Jianghu forever?" Bai Yanxiu saw that he was being used as an excuse and had no choice but to go along with Nanjing Yi's idea. He said, "Yes, Alliance Master Zhang San's words are inappropriate." Alliance Master Zhang San was flustered. He pointed at Nanjing Yi and said, "Weren't the remnants of Misty School taken in by Fragrance Cult as Misty Hall? It was established at First Faith Peak. How can it suddenly return to Jianghu?" Nanjing Yi laughed coldly. I'm afraid that the Righteous Alliance can't meddle with the internal affairs of Fragrance Cult. Even if the Aroma Cult had absorbed the Ethereal Sect into the cult and became the Ethereal Hall, but no one could say that the Aroma Cult had trapped the Ethereal Sect's disciples in the Shirsheen Peak all this time, right? Furthermore, the reason why my Fragrant Cult took in the disciples of the Ethereal Sect was because the mistress of the sect master of the Ethereal Sect was a disciple of my Fragrant Cult. Moreover, she was a direct disciple of my cult. If my cult didn't take her in, wouldn't she have been killed? Great harm to Jianghu. Right now, Misty Hall is in Fragrance Cult and doesn't fit in with the other branches of Fragrance Cult. There's always trouble. Moreover, our disciples have fulfilled their duties as elders and used their own strength to protect the remnants of Misty School's disciples for 4 to 5 years. It can be said that they didn't let down her lay husband. She herself told us that she was tired and didn't have the ability to lead Misty School anymore. She begged us to release Misty School's disciples from Fragrance Cult and let them grow in the melting pot that is Jianghu. We've thought about it over and over again. It just so happened that Fragrance Cult's restrictions were lifted. It can be said that the heavens are helping Misty School, so we've decided to let go, to let Misty School become their own Misty School again. When did this happen? Misty School's disciples will also return to Jianghu with Fragrance Cult? Alliance Master Zhang San had an ominous feeling in his heart. Of course not. Nanjing waved her hand and said, Misty School may be an immortal sect, but it's already declining. How can it compare to Fragrance Cult and between the clouds and the water? They don't have the right to hold a martial arts convention. You're saying, Alliance Master Zhang San said anxiously, they have already left Fragrance Cult? Yes. Let me think. Nanjing tilted her head and thought for a moment. Maybe 3 months, maybe 2 months, but it won't be less than a month. We've already let them leave Fragrance Cult. Alliance Master Zhang San was shocked. Oh, that's right. After the Misty Sect, disciples left Yinchi Lake. They headed north. As for where they went, I don't know. Anyway, I've already let go of the Incense Cult. It's not appropriate to meddle too much. Alliance Master Zhang San stuttered. He didn't know what to say. Since they were heading north, what else could he say? If they didn't go to Pingyang City, where could they go? And this was something that happened 2 to 3 months ago. Why didn't he receive any news? Thinking of this, Alliance Master Zhang San calmed down. The incident had already happened 3 months ago, so there was no need to rush. Even if he couldn't send the news out today, he could do it tomorrow. I'd like to ask Nanjing. Alliance Master Zhang San asked. Go ahead. Then Misty School has nothing to do with Fragrance Cult anymore, right? Yes. Our disciples have already stayed in Misty School's palace and no longer care about Misty School's affairs. That's good. Then even if our Righteous Alliance and Misty School have an unexpected conflict, Fragrance Cult won't interfere. Alliance Master Zhang San laughed sinisterly. Of course. Nanjing nodded. As long as this unexpected conflict doesn't affect the safety of Jianghu and doesn't affect the interests of many sects, Fragrance Cult has no reason to interfere. That's good. Thank you for letting us go, Nanjing. Alliance Master Zhang San said and sat back down on his chair. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and asked casually, Oh, right, Nanjing, since your disciples no longer care about Misty School's affairs, who became the leader of Misty School? Didn't I already say? Misty School has reappeared in Jianghu and is no longer under Fragrance Cult's control. No matter who becomes the leader, it has nothing to do with Fragrance Cult. Nanjing said flawlessly. However, I seem to have heard from my disciples that Misty School elected a new leader after Yinchi Lake left. Let me think. I think it's someone called Zhang Xiao. Zhang Xiao exclaimed. Then, she felt that something was wrong and immediately covered her mouth. Meng Qi was also stunned. She turned around and looked at Zhang Xiaohua with a strange expression in her eyes. When Nanjing heard Zhang Xiaohua's voice, she raised her head slightly and looked at her in surprise. Then, she realized and nodded. Yes, it should be the disciple of Misty Hall who brought you out of Orchid Dusk. Zhang Xiaohua laughed. Then if I have the chance, I'll go and congratulate Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohu saved your life. Of course, you can go and thank him. However, you can't do it under the banner of Fragrance Cult. Nanjing Yi said with a double meaning. How could Zhang Xiaohua not know? He nodded and said, Disciple understands. Alliance Master Zhang San was puzzled. He didn't seem to be familiar with the name Zhang Xiaohu. He also didn't know why this person was elected as the leader. All right, this time sword competition. Nun Jingyi's expression was refreshed. Just as she was about to announce the end of the martial arts assembly, a powerful divine sense suddenly swept in from outside Huayu Palace. Nun Jingyi's expression changed drastically. Chapter 1049. Zhang Xiaohua also sensed it, but he couldn't release his divine sense. He hurriedly used his heart sutra to hide his divine sense and vital energy. On the high platform, everyone had different reactions. Nun Jingyi was surprised and raised her head to look in the direction of the spiritual sense. Master Chang Sheng raised his eyebrows and stood up unconsciously. Bai Yinxiu noticed it too late. Her eyes widened as if she had discovered something unbelievable. Of course, her reaction was not as good as Garuda's. With a whoosh, Garuda leaped up from the high platform and flew straight out of Huayu Palace. Alliance Master Zhang San's face was slightly red and then pale. He looked at the strange reactions of the people around him and quickly closed his eyes. After a while, he returned to normal and looked outside of Huayu Palace. Inside Huayu Palace, about 2,000 people were listening to Nun Jingyi's words. Seeing the strange situation on the high platform, they also found it strange and turned their heads. At this moment, a very pleasant voice sounded. Both Fragrant Cult and Shindao Sect are going to reappear in Jianghu. How can not come and take a look? Following the voice, a tall and thin figure in black floated in the air like an immortal and flew in from outside Huayu Palace. Behind the black-clothed man, Garuda flew slightly lower with a respectful look on his face. Sakura, Nun Jingyi blurted out. She looked at the elders beside her. Bai Yinxiu and Alliance Master Zhang San also didn't dare to be negligent. They all stood up and went forward to welcome him. The black-clothed man gradually descended from the sky and landed on the high platform. A voice sounded, I haven't participated in the 5-sec sword competition for many years. I didn't expect to come today. Chang Sheng, Jingyi, how are you? Very good, very good. Sakura, how are you? Nun Jingyi and the elders looked nervous, but their faces were full of smiles. Is this Sakura? Below the high platform, Zhang Xiaohua accompanied Meng and looked from afar. Just by looking at the levitation technique, it's only SOSO. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel proud of her flying technique. Then, she curiously sized up Lord Sakura, whom Qin Shuriwe had mentioned before, the sect master of the Tenryu sect. Sakura was wearing a black robe, and the style of this robe was rather strange. It seemed to be tightly wrapping around his body. Sakura's entire head was hidden in the bamboo hat, and it was unknown what was so strange about the bamboo hat that one couldn't see Sakura's face clearly. Although Sakura had landed on the platform, his feet didn't seem to have really landed on the ground. I didn't expect Lord Sakura to be able to come, so I didn't go out to welcome you. I hope you can forgive me. Nun Jingyi said with a smile. It's all right. This heavenly king made a decision on the spur of the moment. I didn't inform you directly about the incense cult and became an uninvited guest. I hope you can forgive me. In the face of the number one person in Jianghu, other than Elder Chang Sheng and Abbess Jia Jingyi, Bai Yinxiu and Zhang San had been hesitating for a long time. They did not know what to do. Needless to say, below the platform, the whole place was silent. A series of footsteps came from outside Huayu Palace. Another dozen disciples of the Tenryu sect entered in a single file. They walked to the bottom of the platform and stood with their hands by their sides. All right, everyone, take a seat. Sakura waved his hand and walked to the front of the 5 chairs. He picked the chair in the middle and sat down. Abbess Jingyi frowned, but she concealed it immediately and sat down beside Sakura. Elder Chang Sheng took a look and also sat down. Bai Yinshuo looked at Alliance Master Zhang San and went forward to greet Sakura. I'm Bai Yinshuo between the clouds and the water. Greetings to Heavenly King Sakura. And so it's between the clouds and the water. I thought it was still called Shindao Sect. Sakura said and didn't speak anymore. Bai Yinshuo was bored and didn't dare to say anything. He lowered his head and found a chair beside Abbess Jingyi to sit down. Johnson walked forward and also cupped his hands. Greetings to Heavenly King Sakura. And Zhang-san, long time no see. Your martial arts have improved by leaps and bounds. Sakura looked at Zhang-san and said strangely. Zhang-san's expression changed slightly and he smiled. No matter how much I improve, it's impossible for me to be Sakura's opponent. That might not be the case. Sakura said, all the martial arts in the world return to the origin. In the end, all of them can be cultivated to the extreme. Zhang-san casually replied with a few words and picked the last chair to sit down. Heavenly King, I wonder why you have the leisure to come to my place to preach incense cult? Abbess Jingyi smiled. Jingyi, your words are against your heart. Didn't you know that I would definitely come? Sakura replied. Abbess Jingyi nodded and looked around. I knew that you would come, but I didn't expect you to come so soon. I also didn't expect you to come at this kind of occasion. Immediately, she said, please wait a moment, Heavenly King. Then, she stood up and walked to the front. Everyone, the sword conference of this martial arts convention has ended. My incense cult has prepared food and wine. Please enjoy your drinks at Huayu Peak. If anyone wants to leave Huayu Peak now, my disciples will also guide you along the way. Because Sakura of Tenryu sect is here, I can't greet everyone. I'm very sorry. Abbess Shuezhen will be in charge of the following matters of the martial arts convention. Saying so, she nodded towards Abbess Shuezhen and walked to the front of Sakura. Heavenly King, please follow me. And Sakura nodded. His gaze swept, and he saw Meng, who was with Zhang Xiaohua below the stage. Abbess Jingyi said to Elder Changsheng, Bai Yinshuo, and Zhang San, I have something to say to Sakura. Please help yourselves. Abbess Jingyi, since the martial arts convention has ended, I won't disturb you anymore. I'll come again when I have the chance in the future. Elder Changsheng put his palms together and smiled. Heavenly King Sakura, we'll meet again if fate allows. As if Buddha and devil were incompatible, Sakura found Elder Changsheng pleasing to the eye. He only snorted slightly and didn't speak anymore. He didn't show the enthusiasm he showed when they first met. Bai Yinshuo and Zhang San looked at each other and also took their leave. Zhang San was already impatient. Thinking that he still had to deal with the matters of Misty Peak, he immediately left Huayu Palace after taking his leave. Zhang Xiaohua stood at a distance. Seeing Zhang San leaving in a hurry, she naturally knew why he left. She frowned and wanted to follow him. After all, Zhang Xiaohu pointed his sword at Misty Peak, which was where the Righteous Alliance was now. A big battle was inevitable. Zhang Xiaohua was still worried about her second brother. However, looking at Meng's flickering expression beside her, Zhang Xiaohua sighed. Perhaps she should help Meng understand her background first. Sure enough, not long after Sakura and Abbess Jingyi disappeared from the palace, Peacock came to call Meng and Zhang Xiaohua. It was still the same small palace. However, at this moment, the outside of the palace was covered with a layer of restriction. No one could hear the sound from inside. Peacock brought Meng and Zhang Xiaohua into the small palace and went out quietly. You are Cauldron Xiaoyao? Sakura saw the two of them enter. He didn't speak to Meng directly, but asked Zhang Xiaohua first. Zhang Xiaohua only felt Sakura's divine sense rushing towards him, scanning his entire body from top to bottom. Under the bamboo hat that obscured his face, two pairs of eyes also shot out, scanning him up and down, as if wanting to see through all the secrets on his body. A faint pressure came along with the divine sense, pressing down on his body and his heart, making Zhang Xiaohua feel as though he couldn't breathe. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, his heart skipped a beat and sweat appeared on his forehead. Silently, he circulated his heart's sutra and tried his best to conceal his cultivation. After about a cup of tea's time, Sakura retracted his divine sense, and his gaze also left Zhang Xiaohua and looked towards Meng. Zhang Xiaohua secretly wiped off the sweat on his forehead. Only then did he remember and immediately bowed in greeting. I am Chuanxiang Order's Dharma Protector disciple Ren Xiaoyao. Greetings to Lord Sakura. Sakura looked at Meng but said to Zhang Xiaohua, You are not bad, although you were in a daze earlier, but to be able to persevere under my majesty is already commendable. Majesty? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and thought to himself, Is it the pressure earlier? What kind of majesty is this? It seems there's nothing great about it. However, he smiled and said, I don't dare. This disciple is a junior, and there are still many things to learn from the seniors. Good. My Tenryu sect has many inheritances. Since you only know martial arts and didn't cultivate any celestial arts, you can naturally cultivate. When you return to the Tenryu sect with me, I'll pick up some martial arts for you to cultivate. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked unconsciously, This disciple will follow Heavenly King to the Tenryu sect? Sakura ignored him and asked again, How did you meet ya? Tell me the ins and outs of the matter. Oh, yes, during this period of time, you must have found many clues. Tell me everything. Zhang Xiaohua took a look at Meng. At this time, Meng still had her head lowered and didn't know what she was thinking. Hence, she told him everything from the first time she met Meng Qi until she found the small village outside the town. Of course, Zhang Xiaohua talked about Meng Qi's matters and didn't talk about her own matters. Presumably, even if Zhang Xiaohua wanted to talk about it, Sakura might not be willing to listen. After Zhang Xiaohua finished, Sakura nodded and asked, Presumably, already know about your background? Reporting to Sakura, I already know. However, I've already lost all my memories. I still don't know why Mother is the sacred ambassador of the Tenryu sect and why I myself have been missing for so many years. Your mother isn't some sacred ambassador. The sacred ambassador is a title to outsiders. Your mother is the previous saintess of the Tenryu sect. However, because of some other reasons, she left the Tenryu sect and chose to live in a small village. As for the reason, I don't need to tell you now. You will definitely understand in the future. And you are the current saintess of the Tenryu sect. Me? Meng raised her head in astonishment and asked in puzzlement, This matter, how come I don't know about it? Sakura looked at Meng Qi's familiar face and smiled. You silly child. Then he looked at Nanjing Yi and said, This is the matter of the Tenryu sect. Nun, can you leave for a moment? Of course. Nanjing Yi stood up and left. Zhang Xiaohua also wanted to leave, but was stopped by Sakura. Ren Xiaoyao, don't go. This is also related to you. Me? Zhang Xiaohua was baffled. Chapter 1050. Not only was Zhang Xiaohua stunned, even Nanjing Yi, who was about to walk out of the small palace, frowned. She looked back at Zhang Xiaohua thoughtfully and nodded. Since Sakura asked you to stay here, then you will stay here. Yes, sect leader. Zhang Xiaohua agreed. When Abbess Jing Yi left the palace, Sakura used his divine sense to scan the place. He snorted from his nose and waved his left hand. Several wisps of black gas flew out from his hand and landed on the floor of the palace, disappearing without a trace. Sakura then waved his right hand again and quickly threw out a red jade talisman. When the jade talisman landed on the floor, Sakura muttered something. After a long while, several wisps of black gas activated the restriction. A red light screen flashed and disappeared, covering the entire palace. Seeing Sakura's familiar technique and strange incantation, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but think. The Tenryu sect is a demonic sect, and the cultivation method they practice is different from the way of immortality. Looking at Sakura's incantation is quite different from the way of immortality, but the technique is similar. I'm afraid the Tenryu sect made some improvements after the sharp decline of the chi of heaven and earth. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua staring at him, Sakura was also concerned. After he finished setting up the restriction, he said, "About your experience, Rin Xiaoyao has already told me. It's really been hard on you." Then, Sakura seemed to be recalling something and said with a long tone, "Actually, when you left the small village and met Rin Xiaoyao for the first time, you were in the Tenryu sect." Ah, Meng Qi was surprised. Why don't I have any impression of it? Hee. It's normal that you don't have any impression. Actually, since the previous saintess lived in seclusion, our sect has been looking for her because it involves a great secret of the Tenryu sect. This is bad. Why are you talking about the Tenryu sect's greatest secret in front of an outsider like me? Isn't this? Zhang Xiaohua was a little nervous. Her eyes darted around as if she was looking for a way to escape. In my Tenryu sect, Sakura has always been the leader, followed by the saintess, and then the other heavenly kings. But do you know why the saintess, who doesn't have high martial arts, has a higher status than the heavenly kings? Zhang Xiaohua shrugged. Meng also looked at him in puzzlement and asked Sakura, "May Heavenly King please dispel my doubts?" Because it's very simple. The husband chosen by the saintess is the Tenryu sect's next generation Sakura. The daughter of the saintess is the next saintess. Sakura said word by word, shocking Zhang Xiaohua and Meng so much that their mouths were wide open, not knowing what to do. In my Tenryu sect, there's always a saying, first there's the saintess, then there's Sakura, then there's the heavenly kings. Therefore, the saintess is the root of my Tenryu sect's existence, and also the link of inheritance. But Meng wanted to speak, but was stopped by Di Shi Tian. Actually, there's no buts. Madam Aya, who is your mother, is the previous generation saintess. This lord is the husband she chose, so this lord is Di Shi Tian. And you are the daughter of the previous generation saintess, which is also this generation's saintess. In other words, you, Xiaoya, is this lord's daughter. Meng and Zhang Xiaohua had already heard it from Sakura's words. They didn't dare to believe it. It wasn't that they didn't guess Lady Aya's position in the Tenryu sect and Meng's position in the Tenryu sect, but they never thought that Meng was actually Sakura's daughter, and the so-called saintess, the extremely important saintess. And Sakura pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "If he's the husband you chose, then he's the next Sakura. Your daughter is the next saintess." Zhang Xiaohua was really speechless. He never thought that there would be a day when he could be Sakura. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua's heart moved, and he asked, "Lord Sakura, why are you so sure that we will definitely give birth to a daughter?" Ha, Sakura laughed and said, "It's not that I'm sure, it's just that the Tenryu sect has always been like this. The saintess will definitely give birth to a daughter." Then he said, "However, Rin Xiaoyao, your martial arts are extremely poor, and you don't have a trace of devil cultivation. What makes you Sakura? Didn't I say it just now? You still have to go to the Tenryu sect and cultivate properly. Only when your devil cultivation reaches a certain level can you be qualified to be Sakura. You have to know that Sakura is a symbol of status. All the Sakuras in the Tenryu sect are the #1 people in the pugilistic world, the #1 people in the world." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked curiously, "How can it be so powerful? Is there no exception?" "No," Sakura said proudly. "The saintess's heavy responsibility is like this. As long as she chooses someone, that person will definitely be the #1 person in the world." But Zhang Xiaohua thought of his second brother, who was preparing to attack the Misty Peak. He couldn't possibly follow Sakura back to the Tenryu sect. Moreover, his cultivation was on the path of immortality, so how could he change to the path of devil cultivation? She could only find an excuse to decline, but I'm already so old. Even if I want to cultivate, I'm afraid it won't be possible. Sakura waved his hand. "You don't have to worry about this. As long as the Tenryu sect is willing, you can go back to the Tenryu sect with me. I can definitely make you the #1 person in the world." Then he smiled. "Even if you can't cultivate in the end, I can just use the enlightenment technique and give you all my cultivation. What's so difficult about that? Meng knew Zhang Xiaohua's thoughts and interrupted. Heavenly King, Xiaoyao, if anything happens, don't make things difficult for him. It's fine if he doesn't go to the Tenryu sect for the time being. It's fine. Your matter isn't settled yet, and I'm also fine. As for the next Sakura, you don't have to decide so early. Sakura smiled. By the way, since you already know how important the Sanus is to the Tenryu sect, you should also understand why the Tenryu sect is still brooding over your mother's seclusion and searching everywhere for her. About 10 years ago, the disciples who went out to search for your mother suddenly found traces of you. Although you were still young at that time, your face was exactly the same as your mother's. They could recognize you at a glance. You also know that compared to your mother, you're more important to the Tenryu sect. Therefore, after the disciples of the Tenryu sect couldn't find any trace of your mother, they brought you back to the Tenryu sect as if they had found a treasure. However, at that time, you were muddle-headed and it seemed like there was something wrong with your brain. This seat then sought out the divine doctor in the sect and the Jianghu's divine doctor to treat your illness. They treated you for about 5 years. 5 years ago, when your illness was about to be cured, you suddenly disappeared again. I sent people to search for you, but they couldn't find you at the place where you appeared last time. In these 5 years, it was as if you had evaporated, and there was no news of you. Hee, I didn't expect that you would be picked up by Jing Xian and brought back to the Tenryu sect. Hee, the Tenryu sect did a good thing. Jing Xian is also interesting. She actually wanted to take you in as an inner disciple. She's really shameless. I knew that you appeared in the Jianghu and even went to the Dalan Temple to deliver the invitation to the Tenryu sect's martial arts convention. I immediately rushed over to take you back to the Tenryu sect. Meng sighed and nodded. I got it. On the way, Zhang Xiaohua and Meng discussed a lot. Meng knew that she was related to the Tenryu sect, so she knew that she couldn't stay in the Tenryu sect any longer. Now that she heard that she was the most important saintess of the Tenryu sect, Abbess Jingyi of the Tenryu sect, she didn't have the guts to take her in. She could only go back to the Tenryu sect. Moreover, the Tenryu sect was also her home in another sense. It was just that. Meng looked up at Zhang Xiaohua. The only thing she couldn't bear to part with was Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Meng and then looked at Sakura. She smiled and said, Meng, you should go back. Haven't you been looking for your family all this time? Now that it has finally come true, what's there to hesitate about? Moreover, if you miss me, or if I miss you, we can go to the Tenryu sect to see you. Upon seeing this, Sakura took out something from his bosom and handed it to Zhang Xiaohua. He said, This is my token. If you come to the Tenryu sect, you only need to show this token. Zhang Xiaohua reached out and took it. She felt a bone-piercing coldness. When she looked carefully, it was a piece of pitch-black iron with a faint flame engraved on it. In addition, you don't need to be the guardian disciple of the Tenryu sect anymore. I already know about what happened in the Dalan Temple. Abbess Jingyi must have other plans for you to be the guardian disciple. The Tenryu sect cultivation method is a mortal cultivation method, so it's not suitable for you. And this one knows. This one came down to the Tenryu sect for Meng. Since Meng has left, there's no point in the Tenryu sect staying. Zhang Xiaohua nodded. At this time, the Tenryu sect didn't have any disciples of the Misty School in Meng, so he naturally wouldn't stay. All right, Rin Xiaoyao, I'll take you back to the Tenryu sect in a while. You can talk to her. At this time, where was the appearance of the most powerful person in the world? He was now the image of a loving father. After he finished speaking, Indra removed the restriction around him and walked out without looking back. Xiaohua. Meng pulled Zhang Xiaohua's hand and whispered, You really don't want to go back to the Tenryu sect with me? Zhang Xiaohua held Meng's hand and nodded. You also know, I do have some things to do. After I'm done with them, I'll go to the Tenryu sect to find you, okay? And I know, I'll wait for you. You can treat the illness, but you can't treat it until you forget about me. How can I? Meng smiled and said, Even if I forget everything in the world, I'll never forget you. That's right. Don't forget, I still want to be the Tenryu sex lord. Xiao. Meng's face was abnormally red. She peeked to see that there was no one in the hall and threw herself into Zhang Xiaohua's arms, holding him tightly in her arms. Please cast a monthly vote. Please cast a recommendation vote. Please collect. Please tip. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to cast a recommendation vote or monthly vote. Chapter 10:51. After some time, there was a coughing sound at the entrance of the temple. Zhang Xiaohua and Dream turned around to see Peacock and Chun Chun standing outside. Peacock and Chun Chin's expressions were different. Peacock's face was cold like frost. She was already cold to begin with, and now she was even more unapproachable. However, Chun Chin bit her lips. Her eyes were filled with indignation and even a trace of provocation. Her chest rose and fell slightly as if she was feeling aggrieved. Cough, cough. Zixia. No, I should call her Xiaoya. I really didn't expect that the usually obedient little tail behind me was actually the saintess of the dragon sect. How come I didn't see it at all? Chin Chin coughed and said, Rin Xiaoyao, you have good taste. No wonder after taking advantage of Nie Xiaoyao from the Rejuvenation Valley, you immediately wiped your mouth and denied it. So you have already noticed Zixia. She's not ordinary. Now that you've climbed the coattails of the Tenryu sex saint, can you be proud? Zhang Xiaohua was sweating profusely. Chin Chin was a straightforward person, but he did not mean any harm. Although everything in the refining heart cave was just an illusion, Zhang Xiaohua still had a good impression of Chun Chun and Peacock. Therefore, when he heard this, he did not think much of it. Instead, he felt like he was being jealous, like a wife being jealous of her husband. Zhang Xiaohua laughed dryly and said, Senior Chun, what are you saying? Even you didn't see it. How could I see it clearly? I just like Meng. Why would I care if she's a commoner, a disciple of the incense cult, or the saint of the Tenryu sect? You know that although I know Nie Qinyu, but it was after I met Meng. I have never hidden anything about Nie Qinyu from her. Meng was also a little embarrassed. She got out of Zhang Xiaohua's arms, but still held on to Zhang Xiaohua's hand and nodded. Little, Xiaoyao is right. I've seen Nie Qinyu in the Sorrow City, and I know everything. Senior Chun, don't talk about this boring topic. As for the saint of the Tenryu sect, I don't need to explain. I'm sure Senior Chun knows better than Senior Chun what I was like when I first came to the Tenryu sect. Even now, I can't remember whether I'm the saint of the Tenryu sect or not. Of course, since Disher Tian said so, I don't think it's wrong. However, during the 5 years I've been in the incense cult, other than Master, that is, Senior Sister Chun has cared a lot about me. I still have to thank Senior Sister Chun. After that, Meng let go of Zhang Xiaohua's hand and bowed. Chun Chin knew Meng's identity and naturally felt that she had been deceived. Moreover, Meng's identity made her feel that she could not compare with her. This kind of gap made her feel extremely uncomfortable, so she felt that it was unfair. At this moment, after hearing Meng's words and thinking about the helplessness and confusion she felt when she first came here, she felt relieved. She stepped forward and said, Forget it, forget it. You're just a junior. If I don't take care of you, who will take care of you? But just as she took a step forward, she was pulled back by Peacock. Chin Chin turned back and asked curiously, Senior Chun, what's wrong? Peacock said to Meng, I didn't know your identity before, so I could call you Senior Chun. But now you are no longer Zixia of the Mo Xin Palace, but you of the Tenryu sect. This is a big difference. Although we've been in the 5 sect for thousands of years, but your cult isn't an immortal. As the saying goes, those who walk different paths can't make plans together. In the future, we have to be clear about this. Of course, if you can remember the time you spent at Lingxiang Peak and take care of the incense cult in the future, then both of us will be very grateful. When Chin Chin heard this, she was already depressed and stopped in her tracks. Yes, their status had been confirmed. Zixia was no longer the Zixia of the past. The difference between immortals and demons, the difference in their identities, the difference in their sex. They were all standing in front of Meng and Qinshan. It was impossible for them to go back to how they were before. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she also sighed. Meng didn't seem to understand and didn't know how to explain it. From Wan Wuxin, Zhang Xiaohua knew that the Tenryu sect was created by the ancient Sakura. It was a branch of the demon sect that fed on immortals and was a mortal enemy of immortals. Of course, the demon sect and the demon sect were both rebuilt. The demon sect's Sakura must have considered this problem when he created the Tenryu sect and passed down the martial arts. However, the difference between immortals and demons still existed. Moreover, when the way of immortals was annihilated 10,000 years ago, the way of diabolism was also affected. The way of martial arts flourished, and the relationship between the way of immortals and diabolism was already somewhat blurred. In this martial arts society convention, the way of diabolism sat together with way of immortals, way of diabolism, and by Yinxiu instead of facing each other with weapons. From this, it could be seen that the two ways of diabolism had changed. Perhaps the two ways of diabolism were not enemies of each other. Then again, the immortal path was the immortal path, and the demonic path was the demonic path. There was a fundamental difference between the two. With the rise of the immortal path, the demonic path would surely undergo changes as well. How could Dream, Chun, or Peacock be able to control these changes? Perhaps drawing a clear line and treating the other party coldly was the best way to go. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua reached out to hold Meng's hand and said with a smile, "No matter where you are, what happened has happened, and happy times have been. Maybe you can't call senior sister Chen senior sister now, but after all, you used to call her that. So, you just need to keep in your heart. Regardless of the vicissitudes of the world and whether people have changed, you just need to guard your heart." I know. Meng's expression softened. Zhang Xiaohua said gently, "Also remember this. No matter who you are, I have set my mind on you. Even if you run to the ends of the earth and become a beggar, I will still pursue you." Meng blushed and looked at Chun and Peacock, who were not far away. She spat at Zhang Xiaohua and whispered, "Can't you say this when? It's not like I haven't heard it before." And in front of the two senior sisters? When Peacock and Chun heard that Meng still addressed them as two senior sisters, they felt relieved. However, when they heard Zhang Xiaohua's words, their hearts ached. Zhang Xiaohua giggled and said, no way, I want to say this every day, all the time. I want to say it to you, to everyone in the world." Sigh, how shameless. Chun was jealous for no reason. "Junior brother Run, don't try to make the saint happy. The hierarch has invited you." "Yes, I understand. Please lead the way, senior sisters." Zhang Xiaohua's face stiffened and immediately put on a serious face and said righteously, "Making the saint happy is my next life's mission. If the hierarch summons me, I will have to put it aside for now." Meng laughed and pinched Zhang Xiaohua's hand. "Rin Xiaoya, you bastard." Chun laughed and pointed at Zhang Xiaohua without any demeanor. Peacock could not hold it in anymore and laughed. Then, with a straight face, she turned and left. When Meng and Zhang Xiaohua followed the two to Huayu Palace, there was no one else in the palace. The Tenryu sect was here, and the world's #1 martial artist, Sakura, was here. Who would dare to stay in the palace for a moment longer? At this moment, there were only 2 chairs on the platform. Sakura and Nanjing each sat on one, while the other stood on both sides. Nanjing Fan, Nun Shuizhen, and several consecrators had also arrived. Besides Sakura, Garuda and the others were also standing quietly. Meng came to the platform, hesitated for a moment, and still bowed to Nanjing Yi. Nanjing Yi quickly turned her body slightly and said with a smile, "Congratulations to ya for finding out her identity. I didn't work in vain these years. I hope that if there is a chance in the future, you'll take care of me more." This disciple thanks Nanjing Yi for taking care of me these years. If there is a chance in the future, I will never forget these years of kindness. Nanjing Yi was elated and said, "That's great. My junior sister Jing Xian didn't bring you back in vain because of fate. Oh, Nanjing, I still want to go to Lingxiang Peak to pay my respects to Master before I leave. Meng hesitated for a moment and said, Hee, there's no need. As long as you have junior sister Jing Xian in your heart, where can't you pay your respects? If you don't have her in your heart, even if you pay your respects every day, what does that mean? Nanjing rejected without any trace of politeness. Meng sighed slightly and nodded. Nanjing is right. All right, Jingyi. My heavenly dragon cult has accepted your invitation to spread the incense cult and will definitely repay you in the future. This seat will now bring the saintess back. Sakura Jiao Meng didn't like it and continued. Respectfully send Sakura off. Nanjing also hoped that Sakura would leave early. However, when Sakura stood up and saw Zhang Xiaohua beside Meng, he said, That's right, just now we were talking about you, and forgot about Ren Xiaoyao. This Ren Xiaoyao came to your Tenryu sect for less than a year, and also hasn't practiced the martial arts of your Tenryu sect. It's fine if he doesn't become a guardian disciple. Nanjing, he looked at Zhang Xiaohua and frowned slightly. She said, Ren Xiaoyao indeed hasn't practiced the martial arts of my Tenryu sect, but this guardian disciple, he can also become one. He might have a bright future ahead of him. Nanjing Yi's words indeed hasn't practiced the martial arts of my Tenryu sect were quite forceful. She even looked at Zhang Xiaohua, as if she was hinting something. Who knew? Zhang Xiaohua only looked at Meng, as if she didn't understand at all. Nanjing saw that Sakura was a little unhappy. Although she was unwilling, she could only say, Of course, if the Tenryu sect has any better arrangements, I think it would also be excellent. Zhang Xiaohua heard these words clearly. She moved her gaze away from Meng's face and took out his waist token. She handed it over and said emotionally, Esteemed leader, Ren is untalented. After coming to the Misty School for more than a year, esteemed leader has taken good care of me, and I'm really grateful. It's just that Ren is small and weak, and his martial arts are also low. Even if he wants to do something for the Tenryu sect, he has the will, but not the power. Therefore, I can only remember the kindness of the Tenryu sect in my heart, and strive to remember it at all times and every day. Nanjing, felt powerless after hearing this. She waved her hand and let Shun put away Zhang Xiaohua's waist token. Please vote monthly. Please vote recommendation. Please collect. Please tip if you like this work. You are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote recommendation and monthly. Chapter 1052. At the beginning of the silver moon, at the foot of Huayu Peak, Indra brought Meng along to bid farewell to the people of Fragrance Cult. Meng whispered to Zhang Xiaohua, Aren't you going to the Tenryu sect with me? Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly in his heart. He was on the path of immortality, which was poles apart from the Tenryu sect. Why would he go to the Tenryu sect? Could he really be the Sakura? Moreover, this Indra was an expert of the demonic path, and his magical powers were unimaginable. Although he had temporarily concealed his cultivation and didn't let him know, he couldn't guarantee that he would be exposed after a long time. Of course, Zhang Xiaohua also had his own plans. The Tenryu sect was established on the path of the demonic path, and they didn't covet the path of immortality. Although he didn't know why Indra collected the immortal relics, it was safer to expose his immortal secrets in front of Indra if it was exposed. However, one may know a person's face, but not his heart. Who knew what Indra was thinking? Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to put his life in the hands of others, even if he felt that he wasn't inferior to Indra in terms of flying techniques. You also know that I have other things to do. When I have some progress, I'll go to the Tenryu sect to see you. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to hold Meng's hand in front of everyone. Meng nodded. She knew that these things couldn't be said clearly, so she forced a smile and said, Then remember to come and see me quickly. Or wait until I'm done with the Tenryu sect's matters. I'll go and see you too. But Meng wanted to ask where to find Zhang Xiaohua, but when she said that, she felt that it was inappropriate, so she changed her words. You and I help each other in times of need. Don't forget each other in your heart. After saying that, Meng took the initiative to hold Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Her eyes were a little moist, and she said, Be careful, take care, and think of me. I will. Zhang Xiaohua also forced a smile and held her hand even tighter. Not far away, Abbess Jing Yi said, Sakura, it's already late now. Why don't you rest at my fragrant cult for a night and set off tomorrow? Ha ha, Sakura laughed and said, Even if I want to rest, I don't need to preach at your place. If I were here, would your incense cult be stable? Nanjing Yi secretly curled her lips. He's quite tactful. All right, yet come with me. Sakura also didn't talk to Nanjing Yi anymore. His figure floated up, and he pulled Meng's hand. Although the martial world is big, there will always be a time when we meet again. There's no need to care about a momentary love. Then, with a pull, the two of them flew up at the same time. They were about 30 feet above the ground, and quickly flew in the direction of Dianchi Lake. Our hearts are connected, and the world is boundless. A voice floated down from the night sky. Help each other in times of need. Zhang Xiaohua almost floated up and shouted loudly. Seeing that Sakura had left, Garuda and the others also bid farewell to Abbess Jing Yi and walked past Zhang Xiaohua. Although they didn't show absolute respect, their eyes were full of kindness as they nodded at him. It was as if they loved the house and its crow. Zhang Xiaohua's mood was complicated. She nodded with a smile. When she saw Qin Shuriwei and Su Jiaodong, she couldn't help but be stunned. Seeing this, Qin Shuriwei rolled her eyes and cupped her hands. Rin Xiaoxia, you look very familiar. I wonder, have we met before? Zhang Xiaohua's expression immediately returned to normal. She smiled and said, This, senior martial brother, what's your name? I've never seen a disciple of the Tenryu sect before, but where have I met senior martial brother? Qin Shuriwei was slightly stunned. She turned to look at Su Jiaodong and said with a smile, My name is Qin Shuriwei. I'm Garuda, Heavenly King's direct disciple. Oh, senior martial brother Qin. Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands. Junior, senior martial brother Run. I met someone who looked exactly like you 5 years ago. It's just that person was very young and shorter than you. When I saw junior brother Rin just now, I almost thought that I was back in time 5 years ago. Really? Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously. What's that person's name? Where did you meet him? What a coincidence. That person is also called Ren Xiaoyao. I met him at Shitsue Mountain near Pingyang City. Zhang Xiaohua looked incredulous. Is there really such a thing? I happen to have nothing to do. I'll go to Pingyang City to see if I can meet this guy, who has the same name and looks as me. Then she asked again, By the way, senior martial brother Qin, where is this Pingyang City? Qin Shuriwei was helpless. She simply pointed in the direction of Pingyang City and said, It's very far from here. Junior brother Rin won't go there out of boredom, right? Maybe. I'm just curious. Zhang Xiaohua did not comment. All right, junior brother Ren, I'll take my leave. I'll be waiting for you in the Tenryu sect now. I wish you. Junior brother Ren, you know. After Garuda and the others had left, Zhang Xiaohua stepped forward and bowed. Sir Leader, don't, Rin Xiaoyao. You're no longer a disciple of the fragrant cult. It's inappropriate to call you Sir Leader. Nanjing Yi waved her hand and said coldly. Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, This disciple has always been under Lord Leader's care ever since I came to the Incense Order to search for my dreams. Although Lord Leader thinks this disciple is inappropriate, this disciple still wishes to call you Lord Leader in my heart. Nanjing Yi listened quietly and did not say anything. Zhang Xiaohua continued. Actually, it's useless to say anything now. I didn't know that things would develop to this stage. Even if I wanted to stay in the fragrant cult, Sir Leader wouldn't allow it. So, I can only leave. In addition, let's not talk about Sir Cult Leader's grace. Just Senior Nanjing Xin's life-saving grace is engraved in this disciple's heart. In the future, if the incense cult needs this disciple, please tell me. This disciple will go through water and tread on fire without hesitation. You're better off saying that than singing. Chun Chun said secretly. You won't even tell me where you're going. Even if the fragrant cult needs you, where can I find you? Chun Chun, Peacock scolded. Don't you know you have a mouth? Chun Chun felt wronged. It's true. He's gone. Where can I find him? Peacock's heart skipped a beat. Senior Sister Kong, Senior Sister Chun, don't worry. With the fragrant cult's methods, how could they not know where Ren is? All right, I appreciate your kindness. But the fragrant cult has been passed down for tens of thousands of years. Who knows how many difficulties and obstacles we've encountered. We've never asked for help from outsiders. Nun Jing, he waved her hand. Rin Xiaoxia, if there's nothing else, please leave the fragrant cult as soon as possible. Seeing that Nun Jing, he had ordered him to leave, Zhang Xiaoan nodded helplessly. I'll leave now, but in order not to be with the Tenryu sect, I'll leave later than them. I'll go to Jinghai Lake tomorrow morning. Rin Xiaoxia, there's no need to panic. Hearing that Zhang Xiaohua did not want to leave with the Tenryu sect, Nun Jing Yi's tone softened. Although the Tenryu sect is powerful now and its strength is unparalleled in the world, but it's still a demonic cult. It's not the right path to immortality. Rin Xiaoxia was born with superhuman strength and a kind heart. If he can enter the path of immortality through martial arts, I'm sure he'll have a place in Jianghu one day. With such a bright future ahead of him, why should he submit to the demonic cult? Seeing that Nun Jing he was trying to rope him in, Zhang Xiaohua secretly curled his lips. If Di Shitian had heard this, he would have laughed his head off. This might be useful to others, but if Zhang Xiaohua were to submit to the Tenryu sect, then he would be the next Di Shitian, much more honorable than Peacock and Chen Shun. If not for the fact that Zhang Xiaohua was already an immortal, would he not have followed them? However, Zhang Xiaohua still smiled. None, you're right. I'll consider it seriously. After that, he bowed to Peacock and Chun Chun. I'd like to thank both of you for bringing me here from Rejuvenation Valley. I'm afraid I won't have the chance to say this again in the future. Peacock and Chun Chun's hearts ached for no reason. They both whispered, You have to be careful. The Jianghu is dangerous. You have to be careful. Ha ha. Zhang Xiaohua raised his head. The mountains will not change, and the rivers will flow forever. I hope we'll meet again in the future. After that, he leaped onto the David's deer, patted Huan Huan's protruding horn, and walked straight along the mountain path. The tall and thin shadow was dragged along by the full moon, winding along the ground. It was incomparably lonely. Nanjing, Yi, and the rest had already turned around and returned to Huayu Peak. Peacock and Chun Chun were still standing there, looking at the gradually disappearing figure. No one knew what they were thinking. When Peacock came back to her senses, Nanjing, Yi, and the rest were already far away. Peacock's heart trembled. She reached out to pull Chun Chun, who was still grieving, and walked a few steps to catch up with them. However, after a few steps, she could not help but turn back to look. Usually, although they did not meet often, she knew that he was in Mo Xian's palace on Lingxiang Peak. She always felt a sense of security. However, now that she had to leave and perhaps they would not meet again, she knew that this person had been imprinted in her heart. Zhang Xiaohua went down Huayu Peak and walked along the mountain path. On the mountain path, there were disciples from various sects in the Jianghu, as well as the inner disciples of Ruijin Palace. The cult of fragrance had been established for thousands of years. Everything in the cult had long been mysterious. Many people who came to participate in the martial arts convention wanted to see what was going on. They did not dare to stay in Huayu Palace, but they still wanted to stay in the cult of fragrance for a few days. Since the martial arts convention was over, there would be a few days for them to go out. Zhang Xiaohua found an opportunity to ride the David's deer down the mountain path. He threw Huan Huan to one side and then concealed himself. He used a flying spell and flew towards the direction of Lingxiang Peak. However, before he had even traveled halfway, he suddenly stopped and stood on the clouds. He had a strange expression on his face as he alternated between looking forward and left. It was as if there was something strange in those two places. After waiting for the time it took to burn a stick of incense, Zhang Xiaohua's face lit up with joy. He whistled and flew down. When he landed about 50 feet from the ground, there was a black shadow coming from the direction of Lingxiang Peak. It was like a gust of wind rushing towards Zhang Xiaohua. On the left of Zhang Xiaohua, there was also a black shadow. It was like a bolt of lightning and was even faster. It was also coming towards Zhang Xiaohua's direction. Please vote for me. Please vote for me. Please keep it. Please tip me. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.